next year is going to be an entirely new world in how good our laptops will be. And it will be cool. I think they will both be competitive and like twice as good as the laptop APUs we have now. And welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Tom, and today's lead sponsors are David Protein, where you can check them out in the description to get a free extra carton. jlcpcb, where new customers can get $123 off PCBs. And then, of course, CDkeyoffer.com, where you can get Windows 11 Pro for $24. And Max, thank you so much for joining me yet again. This is actually the fourth time you've been on, apparently. It's hard for me to believe. But for those who somehow missed the other 3 episodes, tell people who you are, what you do, and why you still do it. Because a lot of people burn out on YouTube, but I don't see you doing that at all.
Hi, thank you for having me again. My name is Max. I'm running a YouTube channel, High Yield, and I cover like everything semiconductor related, but really more like technology focused, more in depth, chip design, new technology, packaging, analysis, all of this stuff. And honestly, right now, probably the reason why I'm not burned out is, first of all, I really love what I'm doing. Like it's been my hobby for the past 20 plus years. So I really, really enjoy it. And second, it will change, but right now I'm not doing that many videos. So I've been working on a couple of ones. One really long one is finished. The script is done and it will come soonish. And I have a lot of projects I'm working on right now and I'm pushing through. So hopefully no burnout. I'm pretty sure nowhere close right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something you usually see with anyone who does stuff like this is they start with a ton of enthusiasm. And at least I can speak for myself. I used to, I don't know what I was doing in 2019 or 2020. It's hard for me to believe I actually had a full-time job. And then I was also putting out like 3 or 4 videos a week. And then it slowly goes into a rhythm where you're like, well, this is what I can sustainably do without getting too tired. And it just kind of smooths out over time. And it seems like you have moved more and more and more towards deeply researched, longer form, every couple weeks or every monthly videos, right? Instead of like smaller ones for the most part. Every now and then you do a small one.
And I still like doing smaller ones, but for me, sometimes it's difficult to like define the scope. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I have a topic and it's like a 10-minute, 15 minutes video. And then I realize I don't understand this and I don't understand that. And I do more research and I'm like, I have to cover that, but how I explain it. And that can be a cycle, a vicious one. And I think sometimes you just have to go for it and don't look so much left and right and focus on a single topic. I want to do this more this year. But yeah, I'm doing a lot of in-depth stuff that like takes me a lot of time to understand it first.
Do you ever have trouble naming a video? Because I can tell you, like, especially some recent ones, like if I have like, especially if it's like a huge leak and it's about 5 different Zen products, but like how, like I think there was one I recently did about like NVIDIA making chiplets for Intel, where I really had no clue what to name the video because I can't talk about any of them without talking about, I have to talk about Nova, like I have to talk about NVIDIA and what they're doing with maybe a 5090 Ti, and I have to talk about Intel's future APUs and XE, and if I don't talk about all 4, they're not all fully explained. So it's like, was this gonna be a 100-character title or?
Yeah, probably not in your sense, because I'm usually just covering one topic. But honestly, I think I spend a lot of time working on potential titles and thumbnails, because when a video does well, everything is great. But when it doesn't, you feel like, okay, I did something wrong because you put all the work in the video and then it doesn't work well. People are not watching it. And you feel like it has to be because of a title or a thumbnail. And sometimes that's actually true. Some of my early videos that exploded after, I changed the thumbnail or the title. And I really enjoyed at YouTube, but I really like that YouTube now has this A/B testing where I can, try different thumbnails or even different thumbnails and title combinations, it takes a little bit off the load where you feel like there's a weight on you choosing the right title. Sometimes I feel like I have it and then it sucks. People don't click on it. And yeah.
I will say though, I do think sometimes it's not always like there's not always some conspiracy with the algorithm, and it's not always our fault. Like I will say, not that we have to get into this at all, but when I saw that Prince Andrew was arrested, half of the videos recommending my videos were talking about that, which has nothing to do with my stuff. And what that tells you is everyone was looking at something else at the time, and that can't be helped. Like it just so happens that people are interested in one subject instead of tech. I think that's something, you know, I dealt with a lot in 2021, and now we're both kind of dealing with now again with the RAM shortage, causing people to be a little less interested in tech, unfortunately, even though I still think there's plenty to talk about, and it's not like everything's more expensive, but I'm sure you've noticed that too with the RAM shortage.
Some things are cheaper, like motherboards, monitors, everything that you basically need, but if it doesn't matter, you still need memory, right? You still need DRAM, so it's really tough.
Carbon Cry writes in and says, where do you feel the common knowledge in discussion in our niche area fails to properly show the beautiful complexity of computer hardware? You know, for me, it's very much the narrowness of discourse. Sometimes it feels like people will only talk about NVIDIA, AMD, and Intel in just TSMC or just ASML. There are massive players like Broadcom, Mediacom, Global Foundries, ASC, UMC, LAM, TEL, and Applied Materials. I couldn't agree with that more. All the time people... Where this touches me the most is when I see people go, well, if Intel goes away, AMD will be a monopoly. And I'm like, they're competing with Apple and ARM companies and like, there's way more companies than just those big three. But that's how I think about it. How do you think about his question?
Yeah, he's completely right. And I mean, I'm also a little bit like part of that because we focus on the big players. It's like normal, right? That you focus on the big players. And especially in the packaging area, there's so much going on. But honestly, everyone talks about TSMC and TSMC's packaging. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of taken as a one size fits all for everything, right? Because especially packaging is something that companies are like pretty secretive about, right? They will tell you core count, or they will tell you clock speeds, or sometimes even talk about yield. And they will tell you proudly it's like a new TSMC, the first N2 or N2P product, right? But when it comes to packaging, they will be like, okay, I mean, it uses an advanced packaging. But TSMC doesn't have the capacity to package every chip, right? Far from it. And you have massive players like ASE or Spill, like the ASE bought Spill, and other companies that like kind of are major players in the packaging world. They basically offer almost the same options you get at TSMC, right? If you use like CoWoS, you have an alternative. Like that's the same. And so far, when I'm talking about packaging, I usually use like the TSMC versions as an example because it's the ones that are well known. And it's always like the question, do you go deeper? And if it's not officially confirmed, it's also a problem like, do you speculate? Or like, for example, Strix Halo, like on the packaging itself, there's like a CK engraving, which is very unlikely from TSMC, right? It's probably from AAC or Spill, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm always talking about InfoOS. And of course, they have the same packaging over at these other OSATs. That's what they're called. But honestly, that's something I think I want to do a video about packaging, the packaging landscape, because it's actually interesting if you think about it, how many players there are and what they offer. Sometimes even better than TSMC when it comes to some forms of packaging.
Mm-hmm. The Paradox, he writes in and says, you, Max, recently did a Zen 6 mockup for semi-analysis where it stated that Zen 6 server uses bridge dies. What are your thoughts on how this advanced packaging will transform compute? Could you imagine this technology being employed in future consumer GPUs for faster memory? I know you've talked about the lower latency of Strix Halo with the sea of wires, but do you expect bridge dies to have a similar benefit? The semi-analysis use of the label COWOSL in the BOM estimate. Also, do you view this as a general term then for this type of packaging that encompasses things like ASCs, FOCOSB? And how interchangeable do you think these advanced packaging technologies are? Well, and I will jump into, and he says, could you imagine this technology being employed in future consumer GPUs? They will be. RDNA 5 will use bridge dies between the memory controller portion and the memory controller / CU portion, and then just the video output, or APU side of it with the CPU cores. So I think just right away, already they're seemingly going to use bridge dies for basically every single product they make.
Yeah, and I mean, look at RDNA 3, right? Navi 31, 32. They used a kind of fan out even before we saw it in Strix Halo. I think it doesn't matter if you use like an organic redistribution layer or a silicon bridge, right? The silicon bridge allows you to have even smaller wires and even lower power consumption and like make everything. But the technology behind it, the idea behind it is the same. And the idea is that if you look at the recent Zen CPUs, like not only the recent, but if you look at everything from Zen 2 until Zen 5 right now, AMD uses the Infinity Fabric on package technology interconnect, right? And for that, you have like a SerDes, which means you take the chips internally, they have a lot of parallel signals. And if you want to connect two chips with each other without this advanced packaging, you need to connect them. And you do this by taking the parallel signal, then transforming it into a serial signal, then drive that serial signal with a high-speed interconnect over the package or over whatever interconnect substrate you use to the other chip, and then you have to transform it from a serial into a parallel again. And that takes time, right? You have to transform it twice. It's power hungry because driving a serial signal that's basically capable of pumping out as like all the parallel signals in an acceptable speed, that takes a lot of energy. And then you need these SerDes, they take up silicon space. And if you switch to like an RDL or a silicon bridge, and you can basically use like a sea of wires, you directly connect the chips with each other with like hundreds of interconnects, you can basically stay in a parallel signal. You can keep the parallel signal from one chip and just use it as a parallel signal to drive it to the other chip. You don't need SerDes, you don't need to transform the chip. In theory, you can have higher bandwidth. You don't have to be, but you can. You have lower latency because you're not transforming the signal from parallel, serial, and back again. And you use less power, right? And the trade-off is it's more expensive. It's more difficult to produce. Mm-hmm. You pay more money. You have to have these RDL substrate or the silicon substrates. But it's a trade-off, only money against just better everything else. Mm-hmm. Like it's just from the technology point of view, it's superior in all areas. So yes, I think as soon as the prices drop for these kind of technologies, and they are dropping because the more customers are using, the easier it is to supply like the whole supply chain and to get everything ready, and the yields improve. So yes, if it's better and it's getting cheaper and cheaper, you will use this in every area you can.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you think about it, right, like you look at the various chiplet architectures and products AMD's made so far, it really feels like they've played around with a lot of ideas. Like there were so many people that assumed simply because, Zen 2, 3, 4, 5 all look the same, that's how everything else is going to work. Like, and a lot of people thought when they made RDNA 3 desktop cards, it's like, well, this is how everything's going to work forever. They're always going to do the chiplets. And they actually went backwards with RDNA 4, and it was significantly better than RDNA 3, by the way. Yeah. And then you look at what's going on with Strix Halo, that was one way of doing things. And then you look at, apparently, though, Zen 6, RDNA 5, Zen 7, I mean, everything from desktop chips, apparently, to a game console, the Xbox. It seems like they've landed on something where in their testing, they're like, this works, and that's probably why. Otherwise, I don't think you would see it. I don't know why I haven't thought about it. And like quite literally almost every product they're going to make, they must have seen something where they're like, this really, really works, and it is cost effective.
Yeah, and it's not only AMD, it's across the entire industry, right? You can see Intel is doing every chiplet every chip with advanced packaging. And AMD is moving in that direction. You will always have chips that are still monolithic, right? A tiny mobile chip.
Sure.
You don't need chiplets in every area. But I just honestly think one of the biggest aspects is packaging yield, and packaging yield for these kinds of interconnects have improved in the last couple of years very rapidly, to a point where it's like you're not really losing a lot of chips when you're doing this kind of packaging. And why would you not, if you have the option to have like a chip that's lower latency, less energy, you use less area on the silicon because you don't need a SerDes. Like, it's just a win-win-win situation.
Melodic Warrior writes, and it says, welcome back to the podcast. Something I've been thinking about recently is a sort of design doctrine that AMD, Intel, NVIDIA, Sony, Qualcomm, and Microsoft and others are executing for all their chips. It's interesting to see how some of them are staying with monolithic designs primarily for cost reasons. Yeah, like mostly NVIDIA. However, what I have noticed is that we're maybe an inflection point that is approaching fast, with packaging costs for chiplets, tiles, and 3D stacking steadily moving to a happy medium. Based off of this trend, do you think that a de facto silicon module methodology is going to become the mainstream way of chip design? Because personally, I think a future where you make a handful of designs and can swap them out like the data cards for starships and Star Trek is not that far-fetched of an idea. No, and again, it's fascinating to see what AMD is doing, where you will have next-gen consoles, laptop chips, desktop chips, and to a degree, I guess probably some even server chips all share a handful of chiplets. It's significantly lower design costs.
And it's super efficient. And I completely agree with his idea, with his assertion. Like, if you just look at the industry right now, that's where we headed, right? And another point, I think we've talked about it in previous episodes, is high-NA. With high-NA EUV, you will have half the reticle size. That means your chips have a maximum size of half what they can be right now. And right now, a 400 square millimeter chip is like a medium-sized chip, right? You have chips really close to the 850. That's like the reticle limit right now. But with high-NA, a 400 square millimeter chip will be almost reticle limit sized, right? And yes, we will have die stitching. Like, they will try to figure out to connect to, like, use double patterning and connect two patterns to create a larger chip, even with high-NA. But that's something that has to grow. People have to gain experience. You have to see how it works. So yeah, for sure. And Intel has been trying this idea of like a toolbox box since like Meteor Lake, right? It didn't really work in the beginning, but with Panther Lake, it looks pretty good. And I think give them 1 or 2 more generations, and I think they might be at a point where they actually have a toolbox and they actually use it across not only one chip like with Panther Lake, but across like the whole stack.
But yeah, I'd say just overall, when I look at Intel, even if they did share some CPU chiplets, between maybe one server product or one HED product, and then also with desktop, and then maybe there's like, the extreme laptop, I still think it's like, and maybe this is something that will be much easier for them to do, frankly, once they move away from having big and little cores like they're allegedly going to. But like, I would really like to see them start doing more of like, no, we made this core chiplet and it's shared up the stack and across all of our products. And it's not just like a handful of things. I mean, they've come a long way since Sapphire Rapids, where I was told they had to design duplicate corners just for the
okay.
Yes, that was more design work just to make a parallel because they were slightly different, which is just silly to me. But I still think they have a long ways to go, don't you think?
Yes, but I can seriously see improvement. And if you look, for example, if you look at Clearwater Forest right now, right, it uses the I/O chiplets from the last generation Xeon CPUs. And even with the last generation, they shared the I/O chiplets between the E-core and the P-core versions, right? And you can see that they're actually starting to use their ideas, which they showed 2020. I think Hot Chips 2020, or like many years ago, they showed this like disaggregated design, tile-based architecture. And the whole idea was just to have like a couple of different chips, like 2 different CPU tiles, 2 different GPU tiles, 2 different IO tiles, and then just mix and match them, right? across different products. And with Panther Lake, you can see that they're starting to do this within one group, like within Panther Lake. But even though like the one thing is weird is they have two platform controller tiles, two IO tiles on Panther Lake.
Yeah.
And they're physically different. Like I confirmed that it's not the same. And one just has like 4 or 8 PCI Express 5.0 lanes more than the other one, which to me is really weird that you would
just give them all more. That's really weird.
Yeah. Maybe they're using one of them in a future product on desktop or something. I really hope it. But you can see that Intel had this idea, and with Panther Lake, they're actually for the first time really using it in one class of CPU. And you can see in the server range, they're starting to reuse tiles, not even across multiple generations. And I think they're on the right way. It's just a really big company that kind of was lacking directions for a while, and I feel like they're getting their things together again.
Yeah, that is odd. That's like, I don't know. I don't know why they would do that, but I just think it's because, and this is something I've heard from people at Intel, that there's just so many teams, and this was a major reason why Meteor Lake and Nova Lake actually underperformed, I believe, is that you had one team working on, well, actually you had one team working on, what was it? Whatever the plus version, Redwood Cove Plus for server,
Yeah.
and then another team working on it for mobile, and then another team working on the platform it would use. And if the platform team doesn't work out, that nerfs the performance of both Meteor Lake and Nova Lake. And then it's like, but why do we design this separate architecture for Clearwater? Or what was it for Granite Rapids, I believe. Not that it matters, because like anyone listening will remember all of these different architectures off the top of their head, but I believe it was Granite Rapids that had Redwood Cove Plus.
Yeah.
And supposedly that version of it might as well have been called another architecture, according to someone on the team I talked to. It was like so much better than the mobile one. And it's like, well, why didn't they just design it and then everyone use it? And I think as the company, unfortunately, both lays people off, but then figures out where they're not working well, they are consolidating teams more and more and more. And there will be less of this thing you said, where it's like, why do we have 2 IO tiles with one just having 4 extra lanes? There's absolutely no need for this.
And I think if you compare AMD's approach to packaging, to advanced packaging, and Intel's approach, is that AMD came from a position of weakness, right? When AMD launched Zen, of course, Zen didn't really use advanced packaging, the first one, but Zen 2 started to use, and they had to use the advanced packaging to improve their position by just creating like one compute tile or compute die and using it on Ryzen and on EPYC, right, across the entire stack. And that was because they didn't have the resources to create so many different, it was necessity, right? And Intel's approach to advanced packaging, and we saw that like first the idea with like Meteor Lake, not Meteor Lake. What was the first one? Not Meteor Lake, before, like the
5-core one that I always forget the name of.
Yeah, but like their idea of advanced packaging was to create this really amazing chip. Like they didn't even use normal packaging. They started with Forest and they started with EMIB and all their cool technologies. And they also started in the mobile area, right? That's one of the spaces where AMD is still using monolithic chips. AMD used it to create their desktop and server products, and Intel started with mobile. It's like 2 different approaches, but I think in the end, they're both going into the same direction.
The Paradoxy writes in and says, Panther Lake has looked really exciting, and many have said that Intel is finally bringing competition back to the market. But on the server side, people still seem less enthusiastic. Semi-analysis called Clearwater Forest a failure, in fact, saying it was relatively low bandwidth at only 35 gigabytes per second per 4-core cluster and accessing the base size L3 and mesh network. What do you think is going on with Intel's advanced packaging, and why are the narratives for Intel's consumer hardware so different than Intel's server? Does Intel need to have competitive enterprise hardware in order to be competitive in the consumer space? What is the most important thing for Intel to focus on for future consumer products?
I think you have to differentiate between the packaging itself, which in my opinion looks really cool and it's like a really amazing product, Clearwater Forest. They're using EMIB, they're using Forest 3D Direct, I think that's what they're calling it. It's their version of hybrid bonding, right? They have a lot of E-cores, 288 E-cores on top of like, I think 576 megabytes of L3 cache, like it's a massive cache. They're reusing the IO tiles from the previous generation. And in the base tile, they also have the memory controllers and the memory PHYs, as far as I remember. So from a technical point of view, it's a really, really cool chip. And I think it's really amazing. But then there's the part where it's like, is it really required? Like, are there customers for that? And I'm not a benchmark guy. Like, I'm not running benchmarks. I'm not like a person who knows what the channel, like, if there's a lot of customers lining up for this. I would say if the low memory bandwidth might be like a little bit compensated by the massive cache, right? To some degree. But it really depends, of course, on which workload you have. If you have a workload that uses a lot of memory bandwidth, then that's not the chip for you. And if that's really a bottleneck, then the question would be, why didn't Intel like put more memory channels or higher speed memory? And 288 cores are a lot of cores to get fat. So I can understand this point of view, but I think from packaging point, Clearwater Forest is amazing, and the Darkmount cores are really strong for E-cores. Like they're probably bigger than or faster than like 2 generations before, like the big
Sure.
Xeon cores.
Yeah.
The question is, are there actually customers who will buy that? Because you have to buy a new platform, you have to use these new cores. Yeah, I think in a server area, Intel's 2 different cores approach, and they're actually 2 different architectures, is a little bit problematic. Whereas AMD is just using the same architecture, just their one core is like smaller and lower clock speeds, but it's the same design, it's the same architecture with, in theory, the same IPC. So there's no difference.
Yeah, I think I remember, God, it must have been like 2020 or something, where I first heard about the Forest, Sierra Forest was what it was. And like initially it planned to go for like, I think it was like 800 cores, then 512, and they canceled that one. And I don't even remember what it eventually went to. I think 144 cores. And then the mega chip was 288 or something. And at the time, when I first heard about it, this was just when Zen 2 had came out. This is just when we were seeing 32 and then 64 core Threadrippers. And the idea of like 800 cores sounded crazy. And why not? Everything, we used to be stuck on 4 cores and like whatever it was, 16 to 20 something cores on server. And now they're just doubling every 2 years, it seems like. Why not go to 800 cores? But I think by the time Intel has gotten to where they can put out these hundreds of cores products, the market's gone, I don't know if we need that many more cores, because I mean, I've already leaked a lot of stuff about Zen 7, but it was like what? Zen 1 was 32, and then Zen 2 was 64. Zen 3 was still 64. And then you go to 128 with Zen 4 Bergamo, and then 192. You can see how they were doubling every gen.
Yeah.
Almost, and then they get to only 50% more, and now they're going to like 33% more, and like Zen 6 will go to 256, and then Zen 7, from what I've seen so far, the highest core count I've seen is 264. So they're bare like 10% more than Zen 6. That's AMD clearly seeing we have the cores. What we need now is a massive amount of bandwidth and the cores to be a lot faster. And I think that's obvious when you see like Zen 6 trying to hit 7 gigahertz or something. Like clearly they just want the core to be like faster now. They don't want to add that many more. And the little core server idea with Intel was really cool, but I think it was like, it would have been more interesting if they had like 64 little cores to compete with Zen 1. But after that, I think once you already get into the hundreds of cores, you don't need that many more. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, 288 E-cores like 2 years ago would have been wow. It's launching now, but it's something that Intel offers, and maybe it will not do well. I'm not gonna buy it. I'm not in the server space. I still have 8 cores. I'm still running my 5800 X3D. Not gonna change anytime soon. I'm happy I bought 64 gigs of RAM in April last year.
Yes,
for like 117 euros. I didn't really expect the memory prices to explode that much. I'm really happy I did. Memory bandwidth, yeah. If you find the solution to memory bandwidth, if you to create something like a new technology, then you're the golden boy. I think that's everywhere, not only AI, but also servers with many cores.
This piece of content is brought to you by David, and honestly, I'm really not a snack guy. It's because I'm usually okay being a little hungry for a while until I have time to cook, but it's also because, if we're being honest, most snacks make you decide between eating something that tastes good or is good for you. It's usually not both, and certainly not if it has a lot of protein, but that's not David. Their protein bars genuinely taste very good, and they have zero sugar. 75% of the calories as well come from protein in the gold bar with 28 grams of protein total. And they also have bronze bars that have 53% of the calories that come from protein. And so really gold is more disciplined, bronze is more decadent, but either way, they're both good for you compared to almost anything else out there, have industry-leading amounts of protein, and again, they're sugar-free and gluten-free as well. And actually, I must mention this, I'm supposed to talk about texture, but I actually really do want to. This comes from the heart. The texture of the gold bars, I specifically really like. I mean, I had the salted peanut butter flavored bar, and I've got to say that it tasted kind of like, or the texture is almost like cookie dough, and yet there's no stickiness, there's no sugar coating on your teeth, there's no picking at your teeth afterwards. It feels like you're eating a dessert, and yet it goes down smooth. And I do mean goes down, smooth, right? Some things you eat and you're like, that wasn't good for me, was it? I didn't get that feeling. And so I really do recommend this. And in fact, I will say that my girlfriend especially likes the more crunchy textured bronze bars as well. And so they really have something for everybody. If you're disciplined, they've got the gold bars. If you want more of just a snack that's still healthy, they have the bronze bars. Either way, you are covered by David. And so, yeah, if you're interested in trying out these bars yourself, right now, I have a special deal where if you scan the QR code on screen or use the link in the description, you will get a 5th carton for free if you get 4 cartons. And this also helps out the channel a ton. If you can't wait, they are at Target, Walmart, Kroger, Publix, and other locations as well. So either way, they're easy to find. But please do so through the link in the description. Support Moore's Law is Dead by checking out David today. So actually, I want to talk about this. You brought up you have a 5800X3D. I just put out a leak, pictures of Zen 7, and I actually think it's probably not the stuff that gets people to click the most. I mean, what's going to make people click? Well, probably seeing a 36-core Halo chip or 32 cores on desktop. But I think the most interesting thing that I was able to convey once I finally had pictures was just how small the 8-core Silverking die looks attached to the Zen 7 IO die. And I've seen a lot of people say things like, but if they go to 32 cores on the top, can't we have 16 cores be the new 8 core and so on and so forth? But if I had to guess, you don't really think would you think that's even necessary? I mean, I think AMD is probably being smart by saving money and making a tiny 8-core offering, because they think, and I agree, that most people are probably still going to just want about 8 cores in most products on desktop, probably for the next 5 years. I mean, we could go to 64 cores on desktop tomorrow if we really wanted to. But do we really need that? I wonder what you think about AMD's approach with Zen 7 actually having a smaller chiplet offering for both laptop, but then also for budget desktop.
I think that's a really interesting question. And if you think about how long like quad cores were the standard, right? And right now for gaming, a 6-core CPU still gets you like 80% of the performance, or like 80 plus, right? And
to like a 16 core or something, yeah.
Yeah, and we're clearly moving in the direction. We're clearly moving in the direction where we are seeing more cores, and in 10 years, people will have on average more cores than they have today, or even in 5 years for sure. But 16 cores are a lot of cores, and you need to fill them, right? And what is the actual, like, I'm a content creator, so I edit videos, right? And not only videos, one of the heaviest things is actually like editing die shots, like especially when I'm working with Fritz, and he's doing like gigabyte big die shots and massive file size. That's actually why I upgraded my RAM, because I realized they're taking like 40 to 50 gigabytes open in Photoshop, right? And even there, it's like you don't need that many cores. you need a lot of cores if you have a lot of distributed software that you can like really fill everything up, and like normal consumers don't do that. So I feel like 8 cores will be fine for like the next couple of years. At some point 16 or 12 or 16 will become the norm for sure, but there's like a diminishing returns the further you go. And I don't think that like in 50 years we will have 512 cores, which
Probably
what we
not.
need is higher IPC and higher clock speed, because IPC is great. Clock speed is even greater if you think about it, because clock speed, you get clock speed gains everywhere, right? You don't need an application that really benefits from this IPC, because IPC fluctuates, right? Something can have like a big IPC boost in this area, but not so big in another area. But clock speed, IPC, and I would say then core count. Or if you're like an efficiency focused person, IPC first, then clock speed, and then core count.
Yeah, it's so funny too, because again, I remember just being mesmerized by like 64 core Threadripper and this idea that we were finally moving well past 4 cores about 7 years ago. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll just get a Threadripper to treat myself. But then, of course, AMD captured the HEDT market with a stranglehold and raised prices. And I went, do I really need that? And the answer I came to was no. I got like the 3950X as kind of a reward for myself. Just I wanted to have the first desktop 16 core. And I always thought maybe someday I'll go to an AMD or Intel HEDT platform, but I haven't. I went from that to, I upgraded it to a Zen 3 16 core. Right now I'm actually using a mobility motherboard, Zen 4 16 core with Vcache. And I think I'm probably just going to go to whatever Minis Forum releases with, because I like that they only use 100 watts and that it's all built for me ahead of time. It actually saves a ton of money. I think I'm just going to probably go to whatever they have with Zen 6 or 7. And if that means and it's a good price and it has 24 or 32 cores, maybe I'll do that. But I got to be honest, with Zen 6, I might just go to 16 or 20 or 12 cores, because once you get to 12 or more, you just don't really often need more. And I can't see, I definitely need more than 8. I multitask a ton, but no matter, like even me, like over here preparing a picture for the podcast to be edited in by Gerard, I talk to you, we connect over the internet, and I have a bunch of apps open. Even then, while I'm doing a bunch of stuff, I mean, I'm usually at like 20-30% usage, and I just think it'll be interesting to see where core counts go, because Intel's approach has been just raising core counts in response to AMD rapidly, even if it's not even all big cores. They just throwing little cores everywhere. But that hasn't resulted in them taking market share. They're still losing it. It seems like AMD got to more cores and then said, it's enough, and they were right. And I wonder how Intel Nova Lake and like Zen 6, I wonder what you think about how those are going to turn out, because it's very different. AMD is finally increasing core counts on desktop. They're going to 24 cores. But it would not surprise me if the 24 core with Vcache was like $1,000 and most of their lineup was still 12 or less cores. And then if Intel's trying to give you 24 cores in an i5, or probably an i7, if that will make a difference. I wonder if you think it will, because I think a lot of people just say, give me 12 cores at 7 gigahertz versus give me 24 cores for, I don't know what I would use those for, actually.
Like, at some point I need to upgrade. That's for sure, right? I've heard really good things about Nova Lake. I don't really have that much contact with like AMD. AMD is a little bit. They actually, the first time, wait 1 second.
Okay.
I have like, AMD sent me a box of AMD cookies.
That's
was
fun.
Like a massive, and like one mug that's like, if you fill in hot water, it says "I love AMD." There was like that's the first time AMD had any contact with me, and with Intel, Intel brought me to Taiwan, right, to Computex, to different kind of day. In September, I went to their fab in Arizona. So Intel is doing a lot more. I think that's probably back from the time when Intel was like the top dog for so many years, and they built all these public relations and influencer relation and press relation teams, and they kind of know what they're doing, at least here in Europe, in Germany. And AMD is a little bit more like timid, and you have to ask if you want to get a free briefing, at least for me. But I think there's like, where are we? Sorry, I just completely lost the.
Well, I'm saying like how you think the approach of Nova Lake versus Zen 6, where AMD is increasing core counts, but I think they're going to mostly try to make their cores 30 to 50% faster.
Yeah.
Intel's going to try to make their cores that much faster too, but Intel seems to be betting more on like really large, expensive chips with tons of cores, whereas AMD is like, get that thing to 7 gigahertz. We don't probably need more than 12, really.
I got distracted by the chips. So my point was like, I've been talking with people from Intel, like privately, and I'm not a leak channel, so I'm not like, I'm not gonna put the things they tell me out there. But I've heard really positive things about Nova Lake from Intel.
Yeah, me too.
It's not it doesn't say like it can still be a failure, but what I'm hearing right now is that the people at Intel are excited about Nova Lake, and Panther Lake is already doing really, really well, right? You can see the core architecture is doing great. You can see 18A, everyone was so frightened. And yes, 18A is probably not as perfect as it could have been, but 18A, it's working. And remember, the previous generation was on N3B, right? It's not like some old process node, still a 3nm chip, right? And N3B in some metrics is even better than N3E, right? Only N3P is probably more advanced now. And you have these. You have Lunar Lake on N3B, and then you have Panther Lake on 18A, and all the important parts on 18A, right? Besides the GPU, but like the cores, the memory controller, and all of that. And it's performing really well even against Lunar Lake. So with an architecture that's not that much different, like it's just a refinement. And I think that tells you that 18A does work, and 18A is right now competitive. Probably not against N2P, but it doesn't have to.
Well, they're using N2P for Nova Lake anyway. So, but my point wasn't like which one will be better necessarily, because if you do the math, and it's interesting, this always seems to happen where they are usually pretty close. Like it's funny to see like Zen 6 goes to 50% more cores with, I don't know, probably 10% more IPC or something, and like 20 to 30% higher clocks. And then Intel's going to like 52 cores. And so you go, oh my God, 52 cores. Well, that means that they'll probably double multi-threading performance over Arrow Lake. How could AMD compete? But then you go, well, yes, but if AMD were to hit 7 gigahertz, and I can't promise you they will, but they're trying to. Actually, if you have only 50% more cores and clock and 30% faster, you're about to double the multi-threading performance after IPCs anyways. And so I'm just curious, like your approach, like I would imagine the replacement for the 8-core will either have 10 or 12 cores from AMD, and those will probably go to like 6.5 to 7 gigahertz, depending on how the binning works out from the flagship. And I'm just wondering how you think that will play out in the consumer space and what people choose to buy. Like you say, oh, you'll need to upgrade eventually. It's like, well, what would you choose? Because I believe the Ultra 7 is going to be 8 plus 16, and that will compete with like the most conventional comparison would be a 12 core from AMD. Do you want 12 cores or do you want 24 cores? But remember, the 12 cores are clocked 30% faster. You know, I'm wondering what consumers will decide.
I think it will also have to do with platform, right? AM4 has become the GOAT. It's so many people use AM4. It's like the first platform where I actually upgraded multiple CPUs. I started with like a Zen Plus 2600X. I went to a 3600, and then I went to the 5800X 3D. And you could have bought a Ryzen 5 1600 with a B350 motherboard in 2017, and then now upgraded to like a 5800X 3D, and it still works. And I think that's something people keep in mind. And it looks similar. Like AM5 is shaping up to be a similar success, right? You have Zen 4, you have Zen 5, you have Zen 6, probably Zen 7, right? And people remember that. And Intel needs to have a roadmap for their platform. And it doesn't have to be 10 generations. It doesn't have to be 5 generations, but it should be 3 generations, right? At least. And if they can show that, if they say, well, Nova Lake will work here, right? The next generation, that's not just a simple like refresh. That's like a next generation will also work. And the one after that will also run on this platform. They need to get away from this two architectures and we're done.
Or one.
Yeah, or one. They didn't want it to be, but because it never happened for
Arrow Lake refresh and for the 40 core Arrow Lake refresh and for Meteor Lake, Arrow Lake ended up having one generation basically, and that's just unacceptable. But again, I think that's their team's not communicating thing there.
Honestly, if you really look at it, like Arrow Lake, like a 280K, 285K, whatever they have, it's, in my opinion, a better chip than like a 14900K because it offers similar performance, and it's really similar performance. It's actually probably more in multi-threading, but at a much lower power. But it's not something to write home about. It's not a wow effect. It's just like it feels like the same as before, more efficient, which is good for the company, but it's not something consumers notice. And and then it's like a one generation platform, right? So I'm really interested in Nova Lake. I will check everything. I may be running my 5800 X3D for another year, so there's no rush yet. But I think right now my go-to would probably like a 12-core Zen 6. If memory prices get to a level where I can actually afford like at least 64 gigs of memory. But I think there's a pretty good chance that Nova Lake performs really, really well, and why not?
Yeah, it sounds like you would lean towards 12 cores at 7 gigahertz because you don't think you need more cores than that, is what it comes down to.
Honestly, I'm fine with 8 cores right now, and they even clocked lower, and the limiting factor when I'm editing is mostly like my GPU, right?
Well, and I still don't know for sure, but I do know at least some of the IO dies with Zen 6 and especially Zen 7 have low power cores in them.
Yeah.
So imagine a future where, again, with Zen 7 Silverking, where yes, it's only 8 cores, but then you have 2 low power cores perhaps on an IO die, and it's really 10 cores. Almost no one needs more than that, you know.
Or just use them for low power. It's like what Intel tried with Meteor Lake and other, where you have like low power cores on the SoC tile or whatever. And let's say most of the time I'm not editing and I'm not gaming. I'm just, the browser's open and I'm just on X reading fake news about Iran or whatever is going on right now. Honestly, like seriously, I would say 80% of the thing on the feed is just, you can't just disregard it. It's like so many AI fakes, whatever. But that's not the topic here.
Yeah, it seems like too, what you're saying is what it's really going to come down. What will be very important for Nova Lake is proving that the platform will have longevity. I haven't actually looked into them, but I've seen rumors out there that like Nova Lake will have a very powerful chipset offering, which it should. I mean, when you get up to 52 cores, I mean, we're talking about HEDT levels. That's here.
True, yeah.
So I think the best thing AMD can do, I actually think, is cut costs where they can. Like I've seen directly documented that they have 6 nanometer IO dies they designed for Zen 6 and therefore also Zen 7. I don't know if they will end up using that, if they will have like higher end ones get 4 or 3 nanometer IO dies and cheaper get 6. But I know it sounds sad, but I would almost argue they should just use a 6 nanometer IO die, 2 nanometer chiplets, and they will still match Nova Lake, probably more or less, close at least, if not winning. In single threading, maybe they'll clearly win that. I've heard they think they'll definitely win gaming. And then they tie multi-threading and they say, hey, our chip still just cost $700-800 and we didn't put all these fancy tiles. And that's probably AMD's best strategy to keeping desktop. I know I want a higher end chipset offering for AM5. I want all of these special cool features you could throw on there, like low power cores on 4 nanometer or something. But at the same time, I have to say that, you know, at the end of the day, if it lacks an NPU, lacks low power cores, but the thing's $700 and Intel's is $1,000, and you know they do make 4 terabyte SSDs. I mean, you can just get 2 of those for. Yeah. I think that's their avenue to success, is because most people actually don't need all the bells and whistles. But I think what would really set Intel apart is if they came out and clearly said, we will have 3 generations on our motherboard, and they will be real ones. It won't be like 14th gen.
Yeah.
They admit that wasn't acceptable before. and they can even just throw Arrow Lake under the bus. They don't have to even throw Alder Lake. They can say, this should have had more generations. And then they have that. It will be expensive, but like $400, $500 HDT grade motherboard and go, we're giving you more PCIe lanes. We're giving you more features. Yes, it's a new platform that you have to buy that's expensive, but this is a platform that will last a long time. You're going to have multiple generations of Threadripper grade chips you can put in this if you want them. I think at a minimum that would win over a lot of the enthusiast crowd, don't you think?
Yeah, and I think right now, if you look at Arrow Lake and Zen 5, Intel usually offers more multi-thread performance, right, at a price point.
Mm-hmm.
You get more cores and you actually get more multi-thread performance at most price comparisons. And I think they can continue that. I think they will continue that with Nova Lake, right? And Intel cores, they're I feel like with Flying Coves, they started to like optimize not only for pure IPC and super duper clock speed, but also a little bit more like efficiency and area efficiency. And they have pretty strong cores. And like this is one of the generations where, like I said, there's a really good chance that I will just end up with like a 12 core Zen 6 if I'm upgrading. But Nova Lake has this potential, and I feel like it has a potential to be a surprise. And that's also what I've been hearing from like Intel when I talk with people from Intel, and they're unusually positive. I even heard some people say, well, they're not, Panther Lake is great, but they're not sure if they should upgrade right now because they already know Lunar Lake is and Nova Lake is so amazing. But I mean, if you need a laptop right now, a Windows laptop, Panther Lake is definitely, for me right now, the way to go.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and it's kind of like if you get a deal, like there's some Strix Halo laptops that are sometimes like $1,500, $1,700 now on sale, which is incredible. And you'd go, hey, if you need that now, that or a good deal on Panther Lake is really, I mean, it's solid. But I think it applies to both AMD and Intel. What I've seen with Zen 6 Medusa APUs, I mean, it's next year is going to be an entirely new world in how good our laptops will be. And it will be cool is it won't just be like AMD Renoir is just better or Intel Panther Lake is just better. I think they will both be competitive and like twice as good as the laptop APUs we have now.
Yeah. Yeah. It always looks exciting. I really hope it will be exciting. That's the big part. And let's see who releases first. That's a really interesting question because
isn't that funny too? Because I remember Nova Lake was supposed to come out this year, and Zen 6 Zen 6 will come out on server at least this year, and maybe they'll launch one of the APUs. But what's funny is they both seem to be getting delayed to next year, and it's just. And that happens so often. The same thing happened with RDNA 4 and Blackwell, where they were supposed to come out one time. They both got delayed to 2025. Yeah. It's very interesting, you know, but that tells you it's probably macro level factors making them both get delayed, less so than one of them screwing up if they both get delayed at the same time.
You're probably right. Or maybe it's like if one side gets wind that the competition is delaying,
there's no pressure.
They could say, well, we launch earlier to capture more market. Yeah, but they could also say, well, I think we need more time too. And if we delay too, it won't hurt us that much. And one more thing about Nova Lake versus Zen 6, that I think Intel is planning to launch the big core, like the big cache SKUs first, right? That's the rumor right now, that Intel launches with like the SKUs that have the big cache, which is different. They're not using like 3D stacking. They use like
they're just really big, expensive dies
on the
with
same
tons of cache.
die, right? And I don't know about AMD, but so far AMD always released their 3D cache variants later. Let's see if AMD adopts to Intel's plans, right? Or if it continues like that, maybe we will see Nova Lake with the big cache launch in like end of this year, and then Zen 6 X3 will come half a year later, and maybe that means Intel could have like a upper hand in gaming.
Maybe my main concern though would still be that they're so far behind, right? I think you just have to be honest about what they would have to accomplish to win gaming, because Zen with the 9850X 3D, I think AMD is like 40% ahead of Arrow Lake, and so we have to be careful. Are we saying Nova Lake will be 50% faster at gaming than Arrow Lake? It's plausible because they fixed so many things in the architecture. But then think about this. Well, yeah, but then if Zen 6 were to launch without Vcache, but it's at 7 gigahertz, do they need the Vcache to keep the lead? So that's why I still wouldn't say we're sure which one.
I completely get you. But I mean, one of the reasons Zen 6 or Zen 5 is AMD is so much faster right now is the 3D Vcache models, right? Mm-hmm. And if Intel can achieve a similar uplift with their big cache models, they might catch up there. And Arrow Lake it wasn't in gaming, it was not an uplift. It was, I think the initial reviews, it was even 5% less, right? I would say that's within margin.
It depended on the average, but I think some of it was a little weaker,
Yeah, in the initial, and then there had some updates, and now it's actually really almost on par, right? But it wasn't an uplift. And yeah, that could mean that the next generation also isn't that great, but sometimes when you miss one step, it means the next step is much better.
Kind of like RDNA 4, which was just wildly better per compute unit than RDNA 3.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll have to see. I just always like to say that because, and it's something, I made some mistakes with this early in my channel's life where it's like, well, you hear what they're trying to do and you're excited and then you want to tell everyone, but then it's like, well, let's take a step back. That would actually be quite an accomplishment if they had a 50% performance increase in a single generation.
Yeah.
But they might, I don't know. I think what I've seen is I don't have the notes. Actually, do I have the notes with me right now? I do. I actually do have the notes because of Carbon Crime with me right now on Nova Lake. Like what I've seen is it's probably, I mean, I was told by someone at Intel that they might be 30 to 45% faster. So that should at least catch up with Zen 5X 3D. But I think it's going to come down to this APO plus thing, because I think once you factor that in, it starts to become believable, because it's like, oh, well, in unupdated games, it's like 40% faster. But with APO plus, they can get to that 50, 60. So we'll have to see. But the number, again, like I said in my Nova Lake leak, the numbers are there that they could be competitive with Zen 6 in gaming, but it would be at the lower, like a candlestick, of outcomes. It'd be at the lower distribution chance that they would beat them.
And we need competition, because if you look at like a CPU, and probably not so much with Zen 6 because now they use advanced packaging, but if you look at Zen 5, you don't have that much silicon, right? You don't have advanced packaging if you don't buy the X3D variant, right? And for the IO die, you use an older node. And you're not even using 3 nanometers, like it's older nodes for both compute die and IO die. So you have like older nodes, not advanced packaging if you buy like the non-X3D version, not a lot of silicon, and the prices are still high. And there's a lot of margin for AMD there, right, in the consumer chips.
Oh, yeah.
GPUs are like, have all the memory in bigger chips and all of that. So if we get a competition, prices have to come down. So I'm always hopeful that.
My biggest concern would be, though, like Nova Lake uses 2 massive 2 nanometer 24 core chiplets with more chiplets on more advanced nodes than AMD. This is something I've also said many times, is like Nova Lake should beat Zen 6, like just on paper. Zen 6 might even use 6 nanometer IO dies, or at a minimum, it's going to be much less advanced than what Intel uses, even if it's 4 or 3 nanometer. And then they're using 275 millimeter squared CCDs, whereas Intel, I forget, it's leaked by now. It's like 144 millimeter squared or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, Intel might be using like 50% more silicon than AMD. So I would hope Intel wins, because they need to get away from this place where they need to use far more advanced nodes to match AMD's products from the previous gen. I think Panther Lake proved that they can be better with a better node again, which is good. But I think the default is Nova Lake, if it lost to Zen 6, that'd be pretty bad with how expensive it is, because perhaps prices wouldn't come down because they need to charge more for it. But I mean, we'll see on that one.
I think it will win in multi-thread.
I mean, it should. It has 52 cores.
I will shave my head if I'm wrong. So
okay. Yeah, I've stayed away from like making big bets on these ones yet, because the numbers are close enough that I could see either one winning. Again, it's like 24 or maybe 26 if it has low power cores. versus 52 cores. Yes, but what if AMD's clock 30% faster? I don't know. And Intel doesn't have hyperthreading. So it's actually 48 threads versus 48 threads possibly. So you can see the math where you could see either one winning. But yeah, I think it would be entirely unsurprising if Intel wins multi-threading by 10, 20% and AMD wins gaming by 10, 20%. And then you choose, do you want an HEDT platform or do you want the cheaper platform? That's probably what we're going to see, right? I mean, I will say the final thing I'll say about Zen 6 actually is rumors that it's being delayed, which I think I started talking about that a while ago simply because I saw N2X was seemingly delayed, and we know that's what they want to use. The more we get rumors of Zen 6 desktop being delayed, I think the more likely it will launch with Vcache, because that might mean what they're saying is we're not going to rush out a cheaper version. We're not going to launch the N2P version without Vcache first. Zen 5 still selling fine, and what we're going to do is delay it so that it's all ready, the full enchilada with N2X and Vcache, because Nova Lake's good enough that we don't want to launch something that loses. We'll wait 6 months and launch something that wins.
And they just launched in 9850 X3D, right?
Yeah.
Which is like 2% faster for 7% more power draw.
Yeah, I mean, well, and Arrow Lake refresh, Intel's launching a 10% faster chip, I think, in a month, that would also tell you that Nova Lake might have trouble launching. I know they're going to try to. They're going to try to launch it, but I think it's going to be a little like Meteor Lake, maybe slightly better than Meteor Lake, where it's like, or like RDNA 3, where it's like the middle of December and they get it out. I think that's what you'll see, but I think the real fight's going to happen next year.
Okay.
This piece of content is brought to you by jlcpcb. Innovation starts with an idea, and jlcpcb helps you bring your ideas to life. With their one-stop manufacturing service, you can get everything you need in one place, whether that's PCB fabrication, SMT assembly, 3D printing, and CNC machining. And yes, from rapid prototyping to full production, they handle every step with precision, speed, and at a reasonable cost, especially when it comes to their 6-layer PCBs. On that last point, their 6-layer PCBs allow fast, clean routing and avoid the struggle of squeezing signals onto their usual 2 or 4 layer boards. More routing means more freedom and faster development, fewer redesigns, and therefore quicker project completions. Spend less time fighting routing limits and more time building the actual project. And 6-layer PCBs are usually expensive, but JLC PCB offers one of the most affordable industry prices. So whether you're a maker, an engineer, or a global hardware company, JLC PCB empowers you to turn your ideas into a reality faster and smarter. Support Moore's Law Z through the link below. Yes, just clicking on the link below helps the channel a ton, but obviously if you need their services, you can also get a really great price on 6-layer PCBs as well if you follow the directions and use the offer codes and coupons below. So please support Moore's Law is Dead at JLC PCB today. Lucas writes in, do you see any reason, apart from product segmentation, of course, why consumer platforms are still stuck on 28 PCIe lanes? So soon we will be able to get 32 core CPUs on an AM5 motherboard, but is that thing going to be restricted to a single x16 slot and a couple of SSDs at most?
I mean, it really depends on what you need, and I feel like I'm completely happy. All I need is 16 slot for my GPU, and I need 2 M.2 slots, right? For 2 SSDs. And that's literally all I need. I'm someone, I would even like a motherboard without a chipset if there's enough USB integrated into the SoC, into the CPU, right? So I'm like someone, I like compact ones. Right now, I have a not an ITX anymore, but I have a micro ATX motherboard. But for a long time, I had like a really small case with ITX motherboard, and I really like the small ones. But the thing is, this is just my personal preference, and I don't really need more. But I know there's a lot of people who have a lot of like extra storage, a lot of additional cards, especially with like how AI is doing right now. Maybe like having multiple cards, multiple GPUs, multiple accelerators, whatever, is really important. And if you have all these cores, he's completely right? There should be offerings with a lot more lanes. But I feel like the higher the PCI Express version, right, signal strength and signal stability becomes a problem. You need a lot more layers on your motherboard. And you see this if you look at like the AI motherboards for like something like an NVIDIA GB200 super chip, right?
Mm-hmm.
These motherboards, they're so thick. There's so many copper layers in there. It's crazy. And the signal interference you have on these boards. So if you have like PCI Gen 6 boards coming out, right, at some point, and you want like 64 lanes.
I actually suspect we're not going to get those for a while for consumer.
Yeah, because you don't really need it for consumers, and it's so expensive and it's so difficult, and it increases the complexity so much. I think that's one of the reasons everyone's like, okay, we don't have to. It's not our HEDT platform. We're not selling. I mean, motherboards are already selling for like $300, $400, which was crazy just a couple of years ago. But we're not selling the motherboards for like $1,000 on average now.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel people underestimate how much more complex motherboards are getting when you get to the higher versions of PCI Express and more lanes and all of these interconnects, and how simple like a motherboard, like even the B350 motherboards, like 2017, the first 10 motherboards, the first AM4 motherboards, they were simple. They were basically just plastic with like a little bit of copper, and like the complexity.
And they launched at like $300 as well. They've become cheaper now.
Yeah, but they were, for a long time, you could buy them for like $50, right? B450, B450. For a long time, you can, or 50 euros here in Germany. Like for a long time, it was super cheap, and you don't see these anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice with Zen 6 if AMD went in two directions. Like they finally gave you like a 90 class motherboard.
Yeah.
That got you to, like 32, 48, 52 PCIe lanes. And yeah, look, those motherboards are going to be $500 or more,
Yeah.
but 24 cores. I mean, this is basically an HEDT platform at this point. Like, let's do it. And then they have like a really cheap $180 offering that, like you say, maybe just doesn't even have a chipset. Like you have enough lanes for an SSD, an NVMe SSD, a couple SATAs, and a GPU, and like 6 USBs. Honestly, that's enough for most people.
Yeah. I mean, most motherboards still have SATA, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a SATA SSD anymore.
I don't have SATAs on mine because it does have 2 Gen 5 SSD slots, which is cool though.
Yeah, and that's just something you have to find a sweet spot. And right now, I mean, maybe $500 for the motherboard doesn't matter so much when you pay like 1.5K for the memory and like 4,000 for the RTX 6090. Who knows?
Sure. Yeah, I guess maybe there was an issue here too, where AMD was worried about how expensive the big motherboards would be. But that's a good point. If people are spending $3,000 on a 5090, all of a sudden a $600 motherboard doesn't seem crazy to those people, right?
Yeah.
So maybe the market's actually ready for it now.
Yeah. I think there's a market to answer this question, but it's really a lot more complex than just even PCI's Gen 4, right? Gen 5 is so much more complex, and yeah.
No, I entirely agree.
Yeah.
Well, and again, when I upgraded my PC, I was looking into ways to add more NVMe. Like there'd be ways I could route the USB with a cable and use that for an extra NVMe drive. And at the end of the day, I was like, okay, it only has 2 Gen 5 x 4 NVMe drives, but they do sell 4 terabyte SSDs, and it's the same price per gigabyte as 2. Yeah. Why would I get all of these adapters and route things when I'll just get 2 SSDs that are bigger? And the fact that you can do that now does change. Like before, I'm sure you remember back in like the Ivy Bridge or before days, like you just have like 3 hard drives and an SSD. That's because they were all so much slower and they didn't hold as much. But now you can have 8 terabytes in an SSD. It's like, well, do you really need 4? I don't know.
If you can afford it right now, yeah.
Sure. All right. Nicholas Terrar writes in and says, why was RDNA 4 not used in APUs, at least until now? It seems like AMD skipping those new GPUs and integrated graphics a lot. I'm actually curious if you have a lot to say about this, because I remember, RDNA 3.5 was announced, and that made a lot of sense. I mean, it came out, I think, before RDNA 4 was ready. It's a more compact, efficient version of kind of a hybrid of RDNA 3 and RDNA 4. That always made sense to me. But then Gorgon Point comes out long after RDNA 4 is launched, and it's like, why are we not using the latest graphics IP? And then there's now rumors, because I'd always seen for Zen 6 APUs like all of the architectures mentioned, and it was very confusing to me. But now it seems like the flagships will get RDNA 5, and perhaps there's some RDNA 4M for the budget APUs.
The 3.7, right?
Yeah, it's called 3.7 or RDNA 4M. And it's like, I just have to ask, like, doesn't it seem odd, though, from the perspective of, do you really want to have drivers you're writing for 4 different GPU architectures when you could have just made it all RDNA 5? Or I wonder if you have any thoughts on this.
That's actually a good point. I'm not thinking so much about drivers. So remember how long AMD used Vega in their GPUs? Yes. Even if they already had like RDNA ready and everything but they still use Vega. And I think I'm pretty sure there's like a slight difference between the mobile versions, even if they have the same name, and the desktop versions. There's like architectural differences. So you cannot just use RDNA 4 that's in the desktop GPU and just put it like this into a mobile chip. You need to change some things. And it's always about area efficiency. Like they used Vega for so long because these tiny Vega, whatever, 7 or 12 or whatever they called it, iGPUs, they were really, really tiny. They were really optimized over a long time, really tiny. And most mobile GPUs, right? If you're not thinking about like Panther Lake is really great with gaming, and Strix Halo, I have a Strix Halo sitting right there. It's also because it's just a massive GPU, right? But most mobile chips that you have in your mobile, like most mobile GPUs that you have in your mobile chips, they're not used for gaming, right? They're only doing like the display and maybe some video encoding, right? When you watch YouTube or streaming something, or like maybe some light support when you open Photoshop or like an application. But most of them are not really used for gaming, and the older architectures are usually more area efficient, right? You can say, well, I'm going to go to RDNA 4, but I'm going to use less compute units. And then it's like, the question is, how much do you have to cut down on compute units? How powerful are like 4 RDNA 4 compute units?
Well, see, that's the thing, though. I mean, if you even compare Kraken with 8 RDNA 3.5, it tends to outperform Hawkpoint with 12 RDNA 3. And I would assume those were smaller. So, and again, and then like, it depends which one you're talking about. Like, because if you have the space, you could argue that it's better to have more compute units from an older architecture. But the thing is, the newer architectures are always more bandwidth efficient. And RDNA 4 is wildly more bandwidth efficient than RDNA 3. I mean, it's insane, actually. I've tested Strix Point extensively. And if you don't have DDR5 7500 or more, it can almost be as weak as Hawkpoint. Like, it needs the fastest. And RDNA 4 does not. Clearly does not. They increase performance 30 to 40% between the 7600 XT and the 9060 XT. Same memory bus, same amount of cache. It's same RAM. I mean, that's just incredible. And so that's where it's like, I don't know what would happen for sure, but I suspect 8 RDNA 4 compute units in most laptops would perform about as well as Strix Point. And I find it hard to believe they'd take up more space.
Yeah, maybe we have to go and just measure, right? Do the measurements, see how fast a couple of these compute units, and I'm pretty sure we will see RDNA 4, like whatever, like we will see
something.
It's like a trickle. It just takes longer. They're delayed. They finish the big ones. They work on the mobile versions. And to be fair, the only thing that I'm missing on the Strix Halo is that RDNA 3.5 doesn't support FSR4 officially,
natively,
right? And that's what they supposedly want to fix with the RDNA 3.7 or the RDNA 4M version, because it has a really it's like the ASUS Flow G13. It has a really high resolution display, and that would be perfect. Just run as FSR4, and I think it's different architectures, area constraints. Maybe they're also worried like a new architecture can be much more power efficient when you compare desktop cards. But maybe at different voltages inside an SoC, there's like power considerations you have to take into account, right? Where like the older, slower versions may be more efficient at like some use cases.
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder, because it'd be nice if AMD would directly answer it next time. Like, because they just kind of announce it and walk away. But I someone should really ask them and like push them. Actually, don't just let them give you an easy answer. Push them on this, because I want to be clear. Like, there's some people, I understand why they did what they did with Vega. I understand why they used RDNA 2 and then 3 and then 3 again and then 3.5. All of that made sense to me. I'm not going to argue with why they did that. But it is weird to me that Gorgon Point didn't get RDNA 3.7. That to me is very weird, because they knew Panther Lake was coming. They had a whole year to put this architecture in there. They did nothing. And there's bandwidth constraints that they could have just, I could have been 30% faster just like that and use FSR4. And it's a massive weakness when you have an Intel APU, again, with Panther Lake, where they're like, we have the latest XE super sampling, and AMD doesn't. That's just a very bad look. There's a part of me that thinks they just underestimated Panther Lake, to be honest.
And it's also something that, like, when we talk about Intel, we often talk about, like, it's a big company and they have so many teams. And I noticed something, like, in my mind, AMD, sometimes in my mind, AMD is still this company that it was like 2017, right? When Zen released. And I'm like, okay, they have to be cautious with their resources. They have to be, like, if they're doing something, they definitely use it later. That's why I was pretty sure that Zen 5 wouldn't put the X3D cache below the compute die, right? Because first of all, this generation, they didn't release the same product for servers, right? And they have to care about their resources, right? And they have to design something carefully and make sure that everything, like, that everything fits across multiple platforms. And that's the reason why I was pretty sure that Zen 5 wouldn't put the 3D Vcache chiplets below, because that was a massive change, right? Increased complexity. Now you have a lot of T3s because you need to feed the compute die that's above the 3D Vcache. And they didn't even release it for servers. So, and I can see myself in the same thought where, for example, with Strix Halo, right? Why would you put out, like, it's a one-off product? It uses Zen 5 CCDs, but it's a new tape out because they
I know. And again, I think we have to say this because I think people think this and it's not true. Zen 5 chiplets for Strix Halo use different chiplets than desktop Zen 5. They designed an entirely other one for a one-off product, because Zen 6 does it entirely differently. So it's just a one-off way of doing it. It's very weird.
And I mean, it's even a little bit smaller, like 3 square millimeters. Like, it's a little bit smaller because the sea of wires, like the direct interconnect, doesn't use SerDes, and it's less space, right? And I'm pretty sure they learned a lot of it for Zen 6, because they're gonna use, like, it doesn't really matter of course it matters, but in the grand theme of things, if you have a RDL or a silicon bridge, you still have like a direct connection, no SerDes. There's a lot of things to learn. But I was sure, like, AMD would not do that, right, for just a single one-off product. But right now, it seems like they did that. They have the resources, right? I have to let go from this underdog AMD because they're not the underdog anymore, right? Not only are they not the underdog, they're the only ones competing with NVIDIA in the AI GPU space, with like Helios and URAC, and Intel is trying, right? Checkera's Shores or whatever. If it will release this year, maybe next year, we will see. But AMD is they can try stuff now. They can do one-off things like Intel did for so many years.
Yeah. And this is actually a thing. I've actually heard there's still a lot of turnover at AMD, because on the one hand, they're not acting like how they used to. They are doing one-off products. They are spending the money when they need to.
Yeah.
But there's other times where they're not still. And it's very weird. Like, to see like what I've always heard is, like, they're like, oh, you need to come in and work this weekend. Like, they'll say to an employee, and he's like, but I want to take a vacation. And they're like, we can't let NVIDIA catch up to us. Or we need to catch up to NVIDIA, more likely, is what they're saying. And you see that. And it's like, okay, but actually let your guy take a vacation because NVIDIA will pay him 50% more if he can get hired there. That's the part where the new AMD needs to be new. And then the old way of doing things where you like reuse things, it seems very random when they do or don't. In fact, actually, Karino Sugata, a contributor to Moore's Law is Dead, said it almost feels like sometimes they're almost too personalizing things. Like, did we really need a special mobile architecture? Maybe for 3.5. Did we need it for a 3.7 though? Did we need this one-off version of this thing for that? Like, I worry if we see too much of that they think they have to do everything like Intel where everything's this special unique thing. When half of the time just even for like driver stability, just RDNA 5 and you're done. Like, why do we have, you really want to be selling products that are RDNA 3, 3.5, 3.7, and 5 at the same time? Like, we're really going to do that? It seems like that might be a bit silly.
Yeah. Sometimes having too many resources can be negative because
again,
you're
like
not focused
Redwood
anymore.
Redwood Cove Plus, like all of these versions of the same architecture at Intel that really didn't make any sense.
Yeah. If you don't have a lot of budget and you go to the supermarket, you have a list. I'm going to get this, I'm going to get that. That's it. If you have spending money, you like walk around, like, what about this? Takes a lot more time. You're spending more money. And are you more happy? I'm not sure. So maybe AMD needs to focus again.
AI Amiable Chief writes in and says, will it even matter if RDNA 5 is 30, 50, or heck, 75% faster than a 5090 if AMD's software stack adoption continues to suck? Are there plans to accelerate adoption between now and RDNA 5's release? They certainly have the time, it seems, to make it a viable option compared to Team Green. The way I see it, NVIDIA could release the 60 series without a single new feature, and it still might be better than whatever AMD will have ready at the time of RDNA 5. Well, we'll have to see. Maybe they'll surprise us, right? The AMD does surprise us sometimes with stuff. But what do you think about this? Like, where AMD is sitting with their software stack versus NVIDIA?
Right now, I feel like with RDNA 4 and especially FSR 4 and the ray tracing performance for the first time in a long time, I feel like AMD hasn't caught up yet, but they're a lot closer than they've been before. And FSR 4, I wanted to buy a 5090 at launch. I was ready. Everything was sold out. And then I couldn't get one. And then I bought a 9070 XT, and I've been using it so far. And I'm really, really happy with it. There's only a handful of games where I'm like, man, I wish I had a 5090. And that's like Cyberpunk Path Tracing. I would like to play that. I can play it here, but with FSR 4 on performance, and it doesn't look good, right? Then there's like path tracing in Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Then there's Alan Wake 2 path tracing. And now I would say Resident Evil 9 path tracing. Like, these are like 4 games that right now are games that I would like to play with path tracing, where I'm like, okay, I wish I had a 5090. But aside from that, all the other games that have path tracing, in my opinion, are not that great right now, or like path tracing doesn't add much in the other games. And ray tracing runs extremely well. Like,
it's impressive.
I played Doom: The Dark Ages. I just finished it yesterday, and pretty weird game, but really nice gameplay loop. I actually enjoyed it, even though it was over the top. And I mean, it uses ray tracing everywhere, and it ran really fine. And I mean, I had like 100 FPS on max settings, and I played the RoboCop add-on, like Unfinished Business, and Unreal Engine 5 games. Like, I play a lot of Arc Raiders, like so many people, I think. And it has like the NVIDIA-sponsored ray tracing part runs really, really well. And FSR 4 looks great if it's supported. And AMD needs to fix FSR 4 for Vulkan games. They need to do that. They need to continue working on their ray tracing and path tracing performance. And I feel like they have to bring FSR 4, at least for RDNA 3, right?
I do. I think it's ridiculous.
The thing is, I know RDNA 3 doesn't have that many like tops or flops. Like, it has like 123, I think, int 8 tops. And
yeah, the PS5 Pro's faster.
Yeah, and the thing is, RDNA 3 still uses WMMA. It means you block the shader, basically. When you're doing something like int8, right? You're blocking the shader for this calculation. So it's still an advance. At least you still gain performance because you gain more than you lose when you're using these calculations instead of just running the game at the moment. But the PSI 5 Pro has, I think, 300 tops of int8 on a dedicated chip that doesn't compete with like the graphics shaders. So there's performance differences, and from what I know, and AMD hasn't really officially confirmed it, but you can kind of test it. RDNA 4 has actually dedicated, I mean, NVIDIA calls them tensor cores, but RDNA 4 has dedicated cores that are different, like different transistors that run these, and it supports FP8, of course, but it has different transistors that can run FP8, and I kind of understand from a technical point of view, but we can see that modded RDNA 3 and even RDNA 2, but especially RDNA 3 still benefits. It's still faster and it looks better, and they kind of have to get around to it, right? Hire the modders. Seriously.
What I think would be the ultimate adding insult to injury would be if the Steam machine gets FSR4 support for RDNA 3 because Valve ports it themselves and injects it, and then on Windows you don't have it. And I think that's a plausible thing that's going to happen. You would just hope that working with, both of them, both Sony, who just released PSSR 2, which I think it's mixed if it's better than FSR4. It seems like it's maybe slightly worse, but clearly better than 3.1. Or Valve maybe porting FSR4 or officially supporting it on Steam machine. Like, you'd think working with Valve and Sony, AMD would get something done here. I don't know. I'm worried that someone's stubborn at Radeon about this, because this sounds like
opportunity.
It sounds like this is the decision a human made. This wasn't like they actually have trouble doing it.
And just call it a beta. Just call it a beta, right? And yes, if it crashes, you say, well, it's a beta. You can just always use FSR 3.1. That's what your RDNA 3 GPU was designed for. And the thing is, that's the one thing that NVIDIA is really great at. I mean, they're great at creating or selling GPUs that are super expensive and really, really power hungry. But if you have like a RTX 2070 Super, right? You can use DLSS, right?
Yeah.
And they're just really, really good in supporting it for a long time and update the versions. And I think it's like a public relations problem for AMD if it's available.
I don't know if you saw, but Radeon set me and Dan talked about it on the last Broken Silicon, a clock speed milestone, like 4.7 gigahertz or something. RDNA 4 hit. All of the comments in the YouTube comments are, where's FSR4 on RDNA 3? This is one of those things that, fair or not, is blowing up and becoming talked about more than it should be, but it doesn't matter. You have to solve this problem. Ever feel like Microsoft is playing around with you with the prices they expect you to pay for their software? Well, that's how I feel, or at least how I felt years ago before I started using CDkeyoffer.com. That's right, this piece of content is sponsored by CDkeyoffer.com, a fantastic place to get reasonably priced Microsoft Office and operating system software. They're authentic keys that are delivered very quickly once you purchase them. And when it comes to the Office software, by the way, once you link that to your Microsoft account, it's just there in your downloads. You can get a new desktop, a new laptop, and just log in with your Microsoft account whenever you boot it up for the first time, and then download it, and it's done. And there's no need to constantly rebuy or get subscriptions to, monthly fees for Office software. You can just get it once, link it to your account, and then you just have it. And you get a couple, you can jump between different devices as well. And that is what I've been doing for a very long time, since CDkeyoffer.com started sponsoring Moore's Law is Dead. And so if you want to get some of these products for reasonable prices and show support for Moore's Law is Dead, check them out through the links below. Remember, even just clicking on those links helps the channel a ton, and it helps you save money, of course, if you use offer code BROKENSILICON to save 25% on the software on their website, in addition to the already marked down discount prices they have. And then, of course, you can also use Die Shrink to save 3% on everything else on the website. Once again, support Moore's Law is Dead by checking out CDkeyoffer.com today. Lucas writes in, says Resident Evil Requiem appears to use PSSR 2. What are the chances Sony lets AMD copy their homework again and we see FSR 4 on RDNA 3 or at least 3.5 in a reasonable time frame? I think it's kind of silly it's taking this long already. I mean, I don't think it's as simple as like letting them copy it, and I don't even know that makes sense.
Sony is copying from AMD. They learned a lot from FSR 4, but
they don't need to copy anyone. It works already. We already know it does.
It's there. You can port it to. Maybe they're afraid if they have like an FP8 version and an Int8 version that it's too much to.
That's the only explanation that makes sense. I think it would cost too much, but you could still say, you could still just have a skeleton crew update the FP8 version, which is what RDNA 3 would use for everyone listening. And like it just gets less updates. Like that'd still be better than nothing.
Yeah, and I think one of the main reasons this is also happening, like this feedback from the community, is that RDNA 4, like RDNA 1, didn't have a high-end variant, right? The 9070 XT is like a 70 class card, and yes, it's so good. It's generally as fast or faster, especially when you turn on ray tracing. It's faster than the 7900 XTX. But the 7900 XTX is still pretty close, right? And it has
a lot of people who want the best bought it.
It's a higher end card, and we know it can run FSR 4. We know it because you can enable it. And if you have a card that was not cheap, that is still it's a high end card with 24 gigs of VRAM, right? With really really good performance even today. And if it would have FSR 4. It would be that much better, right? Because you can just enable FSR 4 quality and just gain like massive performance. And with the new upscalers, because you're kind of removing the in-game anti-aliasing and you replace it by FSR, sometimes the image quality is actually sharper. I honestly didn't believe it until I first saw it, but when you switch to FSR 4 in some games, the game just looks better than native because the in-game version, the in-game AA is just not that good, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much more we really have to say about this. It seems like we just entirely agree. They should bring FSR 4 to RDNA 3. PS5 Pro now almost has FSR 4, and that doesn't have full RDNA 4 at all. Yeah. And the Steam machine, if that gets FSR 4, that will also look very bad for AMD. They just have to do it. And I will say, I wouldn't be as militant about this if Gorgon, Point, and Halo got RDNA 4, and if there was some form of it working on 3.5. But the fact of the matter is they aren't just still selling Strix and Strix Halo products that don't have 4. They're about to sell new products that still don't have RDNA 4, and it's just a horrible look that it doesn't get the latest features.
Yeah, if you buy like a $2,000+ Strix Halo gaming laptop with the fastest gaming graphics, like if you plug it in and if you give it the power, because it's just a massive GPU in there, you need to support a new upscaling technology.
Yeah, and again, it's there's just so many products that use it. It's just silly to me. Joe writes in and says, seeing PSSR 2 in action on my PS5 Pro, on my TV at home, and RE Requiem blew me away. More than PS4 Pro actually ever did from the base PS4. Have you seen PSSR 2 in person yet on your TV? I have not. I probably will get Resident Evil Requiem at some point. If I do on PlayStation, I'll obviously talk about it on the show. If so, what are your thoughts? You said many times that 4090 performance is more than enough for most people. Do you think the PS6 can be that for consoles? Do you think they can get to just where we need to be, where maybe it's not doing PC high refresh rate, but path tracing at 4K 120 with AI upscaling is more than enough? Beyond that, it seems like the main thing PC is bringing to the table is higher frame rates and frame generation. Are there some next-gen features that would be worth caring about? I do want to pivot to this conversation because this dovetails into both being about the PlayStation 6, but then also just being about RDNA 5. And that RDNA 3, I don't know, to RDNA 4 and IPC, I think was like a 40% IPC increase per compute unit, just massive increase.
Yeah.
From what I've seen, and I've leaked a picture from a Sony document showing this, AMD document talking about Sony stuff. It said that RDNA 5 is about a 10% IPC increase. So not huge, but that's actually better than most GPU generations. But then in ray tracing, it seems like they're going to 2 to 3x what RDNA 4 does in ray tracing, which is crazy because RDNA 4 already doubled RDNA 3. I wonder what you think this means for ray tracing and what you think it means for the PS6, because, the PS6 being 2.5 to 3 times the raster let's say around 50% to double the raster of a PS5 Pro, but then having like 6 times the ray tracing, I think that will be enough that it's just like 4K 120 TVs are maxed out. And then I think if we get to 150 compute units or more for RDNA 5 on desktop, I think just full path tracing, everything's done. Like it doesn't matter what you try to run anymore.
Yeah. I think if you look at like a PlayStation, right? If you look at a console that you use on your TV, first of all, most modern TV monitors are like 4K, right? Mm-hmm. So this is something where if you use an upscaling technology, you can use balance or even performance mode, and it still looks pretty good. Yeah. So this is a clear advantage right here. Like upscaling, AI upscaling, like DLSS or FSR, is perfect to use on a TV. You're further away, you have a higher pixel count, you gain immense performance. So it is really needed. And I think what we're seeing with RE9 Requiem and especially PS5 Pro is, first of all, how good upscaling is and how much performance or how much more performance you can get when you optimize like for one system and not just for PC in general. Like you can clearly see that. I feel like from the specs that PS5 Pro is punching above its weight when it comes to the visual performance of like how well RE9 looks on PlayStation.
I haven't really looked at it closely yet. I've only seen everyone say that it's absolutely insane. Let me see here. Like what is the base frame rate and resolution? It does have a 120 hertz mode,
but that's without the ray tracing or without the height rate. I don't know, but
Resident Evils have always looked pretty dang good on PS5s, to be honest. I remember the RE8. I remember that was around the launch of the PS5, and that thing had a 4K 60 ray tracing mode. That was pretty crazy, actually.
Yeah. And in the previous installments, we still had ray tracing, but it was kind of bad, right? It was
light
AMD's
ray tracing, very light
version of ray tracing was really not power hungry. So AMD cards back then could still run it, and it made the game look worse in some areas, and was little like really flickery and grainy. And now we have like the NVIDIA version. And I'm someone for a long time, I wasn't really convinced about ray tracing. Not that it wouldn't turn
Well, look, I mean, I think it's fair. It sucked. Battlefield 5's ray tracing was, I had broken, I was doing Broken Silicon by the time Battlefield 5 was out. I put out a video of me walking around on a Japanese online multiplayer map through a creek, and you could see the squares of ray tracing appearing it looked so bad.
Yeah. And in the beginning, like I was always sure that's the future, but for so many years, I feel like for a couple of years, it was really hyped, and the benefits weren't that great. It was a little bit like DLSS 1, right? Which was just bad, and DLSS 2 was okay, but not great. But then it got better and better, and since DLSS 3, it's just amazing. And now we're at a point, especially with path tracing, where you can see that lighting is one of the most important aspects when it comes to graphics. It kind of tricks your brain. If the lighting is off, that's something you notice immediately. And you notice immediately if the lighting is just, wow, it's there. And you have that with ray tracing, right? Path tracing is just ray tracing, but just for everything, right? It's just for everything. But with ray tracing and with path tracing, especially, these games, it's the same in, if you look at Cyberpunk with path tracing, it doesn't look that much better, but it just turns the realistic knob like one step more, and your brain is like, oh, okay, that's realistic. And it's the same with Resident Evil 9, where like the ray tracing looks amazing, but especially outdoors, like the path tracing when you walk around, it's just at first glance, it looks like a render. Like it looks like a real time, like a real. In just in 5 years, there will be games where the lighting will be like, you will say, well, that's real natural lighting, right?
It still happens now, even before RE9, a couple times. The way I put it is, in a lot of games that have the best graphics, there are areas that look like a game, but there will be these flashes where you're like, whoa, that actually looks real. In that exact, when I was looking at that, like Death Stranding 2 is actually a good example. You look at a mountain in the distance, that looks real. This person looks slightly fake, you know?
Yeah.
I am looking at Resident Evil 9 Digital Foundry screenshots from PS5 Pro, and it looks incredible. I mean, apparently it runs like 4K 60 locked with ray tracing, and then there's a 120 hertz mode without it. I mean, and this is something that I don't know if you remember, like a lot of people like, and it's still kind of a controversy, people arguing with me over if the PS6 is good enough. And look, it's not out yet. We will need reviews to know if it's whatever. But a lot of people saw like 3 times raster. And I think I may have put these leaks out after the last time me and you recorded, so we haven't gotten to talk about this yet. But like, I wonder if you saw some of those discussions online where people were like, oh, the PS6 is only 3 times faster in raster than the PS5. And then they'd say that sucks. And they'd keep forgetting the part where I said it might be 12 times faster in ray tracing. When you look at Resident Evil 9 here, 60 hertz, ray tracing, 4K. Yes, they have to use PSSR too, but it looks good. I don't know. Like, so right, if the PS6 is double the PS5 Pro in raster with an even better PSSR implementation, and the ray tracing performance is 2, 3, 4 times better, to answer Job's question, yes, I think that's enough. I think they will have. I think the PS5 and PS5 Pro got to where like most people are happy. I think the PS6 is just going to fully saturate 4K 120. It will.
And imagine a re-release like of Resident Evil 9 for the PS6 with path tracing, right?
Yeah, and
same 60 hertz full path tracing, maybe even a better upscaling, like from a higher resolution if you have more raster performance or whatever. And that's it. And that would be just a re-release. Now imagine like games on newer engines that are more optimized. And
I've long held that I think the main killer, well, not main, but a big killer feature for PS6, and a reason maybe we haven't seen more ports of some of those PS3 games, is that if you look at how they did Oblivion, isn't it? I think Oblivion Remastered, they didn't even touch the game engine. They just injected Unreal Engine 5. And like even Demon Souls, they didn't touch most of the game engine. I think it's entirely plausible that what they're going to do is take Killzone 2, 3, Resistance, all these old games, and they're going to do like an RTX remix. And then that's what they'll have like Nixus or something, not Bluepoint, unfortunately. I'm pretty mad about that, but they'll have Nixus just become a 6-month factory of churning out path traced remasters in 4K. And the PS6 will be strong enough that it can just do it at 4K 120.
Yeah. Or like, even if it's 4K 60, right? I feel like the 60 is still really good for gaming. Yeah. Higher frame rates.
A lot of people still don't have 120 hertz TVs.
Yeah. So I think the first time I saw, like, I think it was RoboCop Rogue City, not the add-on that I just played a few weeks ago, but like the first one. And there were some areas, I played it on my RX 6800, right? But I could enable, like it had Lumen, it ran on RDNA too. I used the in-game TSR at like 67%, and it was playable. In some areas, you had some FPS dips, but it was playable in general. And there were some areas where like I had this, what you talked about before, like where it looks real for like a second, where you feel like, and if that's possible on older hardware, I feel like with PS6, if you are going for a realistic game engine, if you for a realistic look, you're going to have more and more and more of these moments.
Yeah, and that's also why I said PS6 reminds me a bit more of the PS4 than it does of the PS5. The PS5 used all the newest tech that it could, went to SSDs that were better than you could even get on desktop at the time. It was really trying to do a lot new. I think and that's because we had 4K TVs. We had all the stuff. The PS4 was just like, everyone has 1080p. We're going to try to just get to where we need to and not spend more money.
Yeah.
that's what I think PS6 is going to do. They realize that PS5 Pro almost saturates a 4K 120 TV. And so you're kind of just wasting money because 8K is like kind of dead. Like 8K TVs are like starting to not be manufactured and sold by some people now. Like it's just failed. So I think what they realize is it's going to be kind of like PS3 to PS4, where fundamentally they were pretty similar, but one of them actually saturated a 1080p TV. Yeah. And this time it's going to be 4K 120 instead of 1080p 30. And that's why you see things like all Zen 6 C cores. No, they don't need full Zen 6 because the frame rate cap is 120. And frankly, Zen 4 goes to 200 hertz anyways. Like, what's the point? Like, that's why you see probably just 52 compute units. They don't need 64. They don't need it. 160 bit. They don't need it. They don't need more. They have GDDR7. So I think, again, whenever it'll be interesting to see how people respond to it, because I still think it's going to kind of be remembered better than PS5 will. Like that PS5 just had all, and who knows, maybe the shortages will still be going and the curse will repeat itself. But like, I just feel like PS5 is going to be that gen that like did everything you wanted the PS4 to do better and was easier to use. And it walked so the PS6 could run with an actual modern architecture. Like PS5 could do ray tracing, but could it? PS5 could do high refresh rates. I mean, it's usually capped at like 80 to 90 hertz. I think all those limitations will be gone on the next gen, and there won't be a whole lot to complain about. And so that's why you see some modest specs here and there, because I think they want to keep that. Well, I saw on one doc, it literally said like constraint must keep pricing under control. They do not want this to become a super expensive console. Yeah. And I think that's exciting because that measured approach to like maxing out 4K 120 on console is going to mean that on desktop, when you do use literally 3 times the compute units, I mean, console gamers will be very happy at 4K 120, but I think we'll be doing 4K 480, and that is when it will get interesting on PC too, where it's like, when do PC gamers say they don't need more performance? Because I think it's probably 4K 240.
Honestly, there is a limit, right?
Yeah.
I think we will stick with 4K a long time. Maybe at some point we will switch to 8K, but like it's not going to go forever, right? Because you're not going to use larger and larger screens. They're getting large on average, and
if we do go to 8K, I don't think we'll go beyond that, because already it's hard to get people to go past 4K.
Yeah, and you have this, like, how did Apple call it? Like Retina display, right? Mm-hmm. And right now I have like a 34-inch OLED with 1440p ultra wide, right? Mm-hmm. And I could get to like 4K ultra wide. And I could see myself use like on my desktop like a 39-inch, right? But at some point, I'm not going to use a 50-inch on my desktop. I'm not going to use a 60. I'm going to stick to like a maybe 40-inch and then maybe 8K ultra wide in 20 years. But at some point, there's like a limit. And it's the same with the hertz. Like, let's say you have an 8K ultra wide and 1,000 hertz, right?
Yeah, you're done.
And when you hit that,
and I think practically 480 hertz will probably be where most people stop.
Likely, right? So the question is, where do you go after that, right? What is the advancement, right? If you have like HDR 10,000 and quadruple tandem OLED, whatever.
Yeah,
micro LED.
My suspicion is 4K 240 is going to be kind of like 1080p 144. Even for some people, it was 1080p 60, where that's just the standard for like a decade on PC. Yeah. And you'll see some people play around with 5K, 6K. And I can't imagine 8K 480 really past that. No, someone will make a 16 display. We already see 720 hertz displays coming out. I mean, there will be other options, but I think the gold standard for console is going to be 4K 120 for a very long time. And I think if we move to 8K, it's just going to be like 480 and then we're done. I think, and most people in tests, they say like you can see the change in color. Most people can't see it above like, I think 500 hertz, and almost no one on earth can see a change in light. So like, it doesn't matter. It's just black, white, on, off. Yeah. You can't see it past 1,000 hertz. So like, that is literally the limit.
Yeah. Honestly, when is the PS6 rumored to come out?
So it's going to be manufactured mid next year. That's when the contracts were signed. So it should be late next year, but of course you never know. Things can get delayed in this market.
And especially with the memory. Let's see if it continues like this. And it's the same with the Steam machine, right? I'm pretty sure memory is a big part.
Yeah.
And especially if you
It
want to have
depends
like
though,
a
because
console.
Xbox will still probably launch next year. So if you're Sony, do you really not launch against it? I don't know. We'll see.
But is Xbox really a competition?
I don't
I
know.
feel
I
like
mean,
Microsoft is themselves. They're like, okay, now it doesn't really matter anymore.
well, I mean, let me ask you this. Valentin writes in and says, I guess we have to discuss the AI generated elephant in the room that is the shakeup of Xbox leadership with Asha Sharma taking charge. Having a former AI executive with no video game industry experience in charge makes it difficult to believe in Sharma's plan to bring about a return of Xbox. But since we are anyway just speculating for fun, let's try to be as creative and come up with a hypothetical positive outcome. Can you think of a way that they could turn things around with Xbox next gen?
No.
Wow.
I think Xbox, like the 360 was amazing at a time where the PS3 was kind of like, right? But after that, Sony is just on their A game. And I feel like when you're like an Xbox user, you're also very likely to like use a computer, a PC. And I never had a console in my, like I had a Game Boy, right? But aside from that, I never had a console in my life. I was always a PC gamer. But if there's something that I would buy, it would be a PS, right? PlayStation, because there are games that it started to change because Sony is putting more games on PC too, which I really enjoy. But there are games that are only on PlayStation, and I feel like it offers something different. I use an Xbox controller when I'm gaming some games, right? But I use it with my Windows PC, and I don't think I feel like the change at Microsoft shows that they're like, it's like one of how many things does she oversee now, right? Multiple departments, I feel like, and Xbox
They're
is
just throwing
one of
it
them.
to someone that can handle it, a little extra work.
And I feel like I remember when Microsoft launched, was it the Series X, or like when they launched a console like where you couldn't share your games and they wanted everything.
It was Xbox One when they were going to do that.
One.
I think they do by now anyways. I think you can't anymore.
Sony was just like, okay, here's how you share a game. Here's your game.
Yeah.
And I feel like they completely missed the mark. And I can see Microsoft. I mean, Microsoft is doing so well in so many areas, right? But I can see Microsoft just releasing the next Xbox as like AI playground station, and no one cares and no one buys it.
That's what I was going to say, is if they, and this is what I keep saying in the Moore's Law's Dead Discord to people when we're talking about next gen, which join the Patreon, join the conversation, everybody, is TV. When they came out and said TV, DVR, ESPN, football, and it has 2 HDMI ports. One of them's in, like, they launched a DVR box right when Netflix was taking off and no one cared about DVRs anymore. It was a complete misreading of the room. It wasn't just that they didn't give gamers what they wanted. They also launched a DVR box when DVRs were becoming obsolete. So, unless you're my parents who still use one for some reason. Yeah. But yeah, I think there's a grave concern I have, especially now seeing the new person in charge of Xbox, that they're going to come out and go Copilot. It's the Copilot box.
Talk to your Xbox. Xbox, what is a recipe?
Yeah. You can see it. Like, yeah. I'm getting chills when you said that, because I can see literally they say that.
Yeah.
Word for word. And it might be a repeat of exactly what happened again, too, in terms of timing. Like, the AI bubble is still inflating a bit, but I don't know. People hate, actually, big tech right now. I think there's going to be a massive backlash to big tech next year. I would almost bet money on it. I'm just not a gambler. But, like, I really think the train's coming. People are mad. The train's coming. They're tired of the data centers. They're tired of the surveillance. They're tired. The train is coming for these people. And I think there's going to be regulation, and there will be at least one company where we will find the numbers don't work and they'll go out of business. Who knows if that's OpenAI, Oracle? I don't know. Something's going to collapse. And if that happens a month before they announce an AI box, just like Netflix took off right when they announced a DVR box, no, I think that's it. I think that's the end of Xbox. And can I make a argument for how Xbox does well? Yes. The way it does well is they absolutely nail Xbox Magnus and the transfer of generations. They continue to support Xbox One, Series X, and Series S.
Mhm.
They have backwards compatibility, works seamlessly with Xbox Magnus. Xbox Magnus launches for like $1,000, $1,200, not $1,500, and it is a bit stronger than a PS6, which no one on PS6 will care because they have a 4K 120 display. But if you get Magnus, maybe you can game it 4K 240. I don't know. Like if they nail the performance, the price, and it plays all your Series X games. And wouldn't this be cool? What if it has backwards compatibility and games get updates for Series X that run 4K 240 on Magnus? That would be a big selling point versus the PS6. That'd be maybe worth paying twice as much. I don't know for some people.
Yeah.
If they nail all of that, it'll be okay. But if they screw up the library transfer, they charge too much, and even if it does have backwards compatibility, but like I talked about this, I believe, on the Broken Silicon with Fan the Deck, where I leaked some stuff devs were saying that it seems like they're winding down software support for the Series X already.
Mm-hmm.
If they stop supporting Series X fully within the same year of Magnus, I think people will just take that as an insult and refuse to give them their money. And then it will be over.
And I mean, PS5 sold so much better, right?
Yeah, shockingly better. Maybe 3-1, 4-1.
And it just means Microsoft puts less energy into Xbox, and Sony's putting more into PlayStation.
Mm-hmm.
And if they want to succeed, they have to think, why was the Xbox 360 so successful, right? And just build a gaming machine and say, hey, if you have games on Windows, they're already in the library, right? You can play them on Xbox.
And that'd be very cool.
And then really subsidize. Microsoft makes so much money with whatever, with AI, with all their software, with all their cloud, with all their data centers. Sometimes you have to subsidize.
Or make a much smaller profit, right? Because I think people underestimate, like AMD is making 50%, not always, 20 to 50% margins probably on RDNA products. NVIDIA is making 60 to 100%. I think people underestimate how big of a difference it would be if a company was willing to accept a 10% profit margin.
Yeah.
Like that would make the 9070 XT probably 450 or something. So from that perspective, Microsoft could maybe get away with a slight profit, but then they sell it for like $1,000, $1,200, and it feels like a $2,000-$3,000 PC. That'd be a bargain. You know, they don't need to really subsidize it that much to do that. And then look, everyone might download Microsoft stuff and they'd make money off of it, but they'd have to be willing to do that. And when I see like, what is it now, an $800 or $900 Series X, I start to worry.
Yeah, that's like, honestly, make it $999. If they can, with the memory.
I think they could.
It's such a difficult, like, it's so difficult to see in the future right now because there's so many people thinking it's a bubble, and there's definitely parts of it that are a bubble about AI, but I kind of use different chatbots for like the last couple of years, but never really a lot. And with the new Gemini 3 Pro or Gemini 3.1 Pro from Google,
that's what I use now too, actually, instead of ChatGPT.
It is so amazing. It's actually the first time where I'm feeling like I'm gaining, like it's like someone I can talk to. I don't know how to explain it. It's like someone I can talk to, and it really helps me in my workflow. And
I'll bounce like titles off of it. I'll send it a thumbnail and be like, how could this be better? And it's like, shouldn't you probably make that text? And it's like, oh yeah, it's just like having a friend. I shouldn't say friend because it's not a friend, but it's like having someone you can bounce ideas off of, or summarize information like that. Yeah,
and it's so fast and it's so good. It's the first time I actually feel like it feels more wow than the first time I used ChatGPT in like 2022, right?
It's terrible at first, I thought.
And now, I mean, it was wow in the first because you're writing with something and you get like coherent answers. But and I think there's so many people in big tech that believe that AGI is possible, and if you get there first, winner takes it all. And I think that kind of belief and with the newer models, I'm also like on the fence now. I think maybe HAI is actually possible at some point. It's really difficult to say, but if you have something that's like smarter than your average human, right? With like a that can access basically the entire world's information at like a fingertip, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's so valuable that not only on a company basis, but also on a country basis, that I think even if it's a bubble, it will continue for a lot longer than people think. But it's
Well,
just a guess. I could be completely wrong.
but the thing is, but we don't know, like, because a lot of these companies are valued like everyone's going to give them $1,000 a month when
Yeah.
really they're going to get $20 a month
Yeah.
from you, and that's the sort of thing where, because I think people like misunderstand bubbles. It's like, like when a Bitcoin bubble bursts and they're like, now Bitcoin's only worth 60,000. It's like, yeah, that's still a lot of money. It's just not 120,000. It's the same thing with AI. It's like, how could you see a 90% crash and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, because it's still worth more than like 99% of all companies out there. It just shouldn't be worth more than all of them.
Yeah.
That would be the argument for it. I would also say, again, I know about you and your personal life, but when I talk to people are just mad at AI. And sometimes I think irrationally so. Like they don't get when it's good or when it's bad or what they're even talking about. But it doesn't matter, because if big tech won't work with people can just vote for them to be destroyed or something, So, and I'm worried there's a
video is on AI data centers and how much energy they use, and it just completely blew up. And it is crazy. It is really crazy. I mean, everyone buys like an Mac Mini M4. Like even I bought one, but it's like I bought like the chip like this. But it uses so much resources. Yeah. And right now you're still seeing very little return. So I completely get it.
Again, that's what it's like. It's not, I'm not saying if it's fair or not. I just think the train's coming to the station. People are going to get mad, and they're going to be especially mad because people act like it doesn't matter. Like the demeanor of big tech people is always like, well, whether you like it or not, the future's coming. Once you talk to people like that, they'll go, no, not if I vote for it to not come. Actually, maybe it won't come. And I'd worry it could actually be counterproductive because, oftentimes the way pendulum swings in history it goes too much and then we meet in the middle. It usually swings back this way, and they get rid of things that they shouldn't have.
Just imagine we have like 2 more years or like 1.5 more years of AI boom, and then there's a crash, and we have all these wonderful new memory factories, right? All these new chip factories, so much capacity, and then your next gaming PC will be like $500 because memory is so cheap. That's kind of my dream.
Yeah, I will say too, I think there's a bit too much doomerism, especially in the PC gaming space, where they're saying things like, well, things will be expensive forever, everything's ruined, blah, 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 blah. Now, I'll be honest, I do think a lot of system integrators and mom and pop pre-built companies are going to go out of business this year. I'm hearing from them that a lot will. So that will be bad for the market. But at the same time, I don't think people get that, like, pretty soon the limiting factor, if it isn't already, honestly, is going to be energy. And once that happens, they just can't build more. And then one company will probably be overvalued and collapse. And then it's not that it's necessarily fair, but it's like, I used to own some individual stocks. Now I don't. I just have indexes.
Yeah.
But I used to have some energy companies that I held shares of, and they did pretty well. The reason I bought them is all of their fundamentals looked good, and then it was like, but then they crashed. I was like, when did they crash? Like 2007 or 6 or 5. It was because of Enron. When Enron collapsed, all green energy companies went down, even though none of them were bad companies. Just everyone assumed all green energy was bad. And so whether it will make sense or not, like, I think what you'll see is like one AI company go down, and then all of them go down, even though it doesn't make sense. And when that happens, PC gaming is going to get way cheaper. And it's already arguably pretty cheap. Like when I look at RAM prices, and I know I'm going to get flamed in the comments for this, go look up what RAM cost in 2022. Like it's already, you can kind of see similar pricing. You have to go that far back. And I do think that
that's true. Yeah, there was like, what was it, like the Bitcoin mining when GPUs were expensive, and then you had
that was much worse than now,
Yeah.
because you couldn't get anything.
Yeah. I remember I got like, that's when I got like my last GPU, the RX 6800, like because it was available for a good price suddenly, and I sold my 5700 XT for more, or for the same price, and
I sold my Radeon 7 for $2,000 to get a 5070 for 3070 for 600. Yep.
Yeah. And they're building a lot more capacity. It takes time. The biggest problem right now is just that HBM seems like a more advanced memory, but the dies, it's still just DRAM, right? It's the same. It's like a little bit different wafers. They're thinner and a little bit different, but they come from the same factories, right? If you want to produce HBM, you can use the same factory and just switch what you're producing. And like next gen Rubin Ultra GPUs have like a terabyte of HBM memory per GPU.
Mm-hmm.
And
HBM takes up even more space. Yeah,
doesn't matter anymore. No one cares. And they have like 512 gigabytes of shared memory on each motherboard. And then like they have more servers, more CPUs, and the CPUs need memory, and it's just eats everything up. But the capacity is being built, and I think it's still a memory cycle, but it will be a super cycle, or like a bigger cycle this time. It will take a little bit more time.
Ronigan writes in and says, last week's Broken Silicon, Tom and Dan were talking about NVIDIA GPUs launching in 2027 as being on the earlier side, meaning that they could very conceivably launch in 2028. So my question is, should we expect the cadence of graphics card launches to slide past 2 years as a rule now, regardless of Team Red or Green or RAM moving forward? I'm asking because I remember you saying something about how the 5000 series is ready to launch as early as late 2024. Yeah, I mean, there are some rumors that it was, I think, going to launch sooner than even late 24.
Yeah.
And I figured that the pace of 6000 series development is more dependent on when 5000 series is complete than when they decide to launch it. Yes, I there's no way around it, right? RDNA 5 is launching mid to late next year, and that means that it is about a 2.5 year cycle, and it seems pretty clear that the RTX 6000 series is not coming out this year. So what do you think? Because I think we've seen GPU generations used to be, I mean, heck, when I got into PC gaming, they were every 8 months, and then they kind of became every 1.5 years, and then 2 years, and I think we're moving towards 2.5 to 3 years becoming the new standard. And it's hard to say, because if the AI bubble blows up, they need to make money somewhere else. You could see them making more stuff sooner, but it wouldn't surprise me if over 2 years becomes the new standard for GPU generation. So I wonder what you think.
It's not the focus anymore. I mean, NVIDIA, they could stop selling gaming GPUs and you wouldn't even see it on their earnings report, right? Mm-hmm. And AMD is like, they're also pushing their new GPUs. Everyone is focused, the gaming is not the priority right now. Then you have the fact that you can sell these AI GPUs and server HPC GPUs for so much more money, right? Like $2,000 for, or even $3,000 for like a 5090 is nothing compared to like hundreds of thousands for like an AI GPU, or like the board that comes with. And it's clearly, it will take longer. And I think the reason we didn't see, or so far we haven't seen a 5000 Super Series, is the memory, right? Mm-hmm. GDDR7, it's super expensive, and it will be used for AI accelerators first, because that's where you need the bandwidth, and that's where the customers pay more, and that's the obvious reason. And all I can say is, if you bought a 4090 in 2022, it was probably one of the best investments ever. You spend a lot of money, and yes, the 5090 is faster, but also more expensive, crashes, more power hungry, and it doesn't support physics. And
I think they're adding that back. Okay. But for only half of the games or something.
Maybe you can keep your 4090 for 6 years, and like half the time you had the fastest, and the other half you had the second fastest GPU. And if I knew, I would have bought one. I told you I wanted to buy a 5090. I'm pretty happy with my 9070 XT, but it's at a point where I'm like, maybe NVIDIA can send me something. That would be nice. I would make a shill video or something for that. I'm fine with. I'm not doing reviews.
It's changed your life. Yeah. Valentine writes in and says, greetings, Tom and Max. I keep thinking about the Intel and NVIDIA partnership. So far this year, we've seen Intel release Panther Lake with impressive integrated graphics, as well as NVIDIA killing high-end gaming GPU supply, or almost all GPU supply, to focus on the AI demand. Here in Switzerland, the 5070 Ti currently costs 50% more than a 9070 XT. And I keep thinking what this means for Titan Lake, which is supposed to be the first, like in 29, the first APU to get NVIDIA graphics with Intel. He says, now 2029 is admittedly still far away. It's impossible to tell what the market will look like then, whether there will still be huge demand from AI and data centers, or if some kind of new robotics and self-driving cars will drive a compute cycle. That could happen. Or even if Trump coin mining, probably not that. But if I imagine Titan Lake launching in today's market, I can see a lot of ways that this could backfire for Intel. Will there be sufficient GPU tile supply, stable graphics drivers? We don't know until we see it on that one. Efficient power management between them. I guess what I'd like to discuss here is, will adding NVIDIA GPU tiles benefit Intel? Or would Intel be better off continuing to focus on their own integrated? Well, so my answer is, the first time they only focused on less, they got more out of Panther Lake. And I think NVIDIA making their high-end GPU tiles, and probably most of them moving forward, allows Intel to make great CPUs. And Panther Lake is great, and they haven't launched Big Battle Mage. I don't know if they ever will. But that allowed them to focus on Panther Lake. And so I think this is beneficial for Intel to partner with NVIDIA, especially because NVIDIA will probably use Intel's fabs and fill them up, and that solves Intel's foundry problem as well.
Like this rumor about an NVIDIA iGPU, right? The tile is from NVIDIA.
Mm-hmm. And I want to be clear, I'll send you it if you want me to. I have slides just showing it.
Yeah. I mean, I get his point, because XE3 on Panther Lake is already so strong, and I feel like Intel is on a good path there. And XE3P is supposed to be the real uplift, and by that time, like this collab would hit, it would probably be XE4. And the question is if, like, because NVIDIA isn't really doing these low power integrated graphics anymore, right? There's N1X
if that ever comes out, but it's been delayed so much,
right? But
yes,
most of their GPUs are like, they're focusing on higher wattage. And I mean, I think if NVIDIA wants that collab, I mean, Intel for sure will agree, especially if they use Intel Foundry. It's a win-win for Intel and for NVIDIA. But it might be a case where, if you want the best performance, especially like it's for like an iGPU chiplet, like an iGPU tile, maybe at this point in time, the better option is to go for Intel if they continue improving their architectures like this. The question is, can they
continue
in ray tracing, path tracing?
Yeah,
XeSS is really good already, right?
It's not as good as DLSS 4.5.
Yeah, it's not as good. Yeah.
I mean,
but
if
they work on that, I don't see like what's NVIDIA's play here, right?
So I actually think, and I don't know if you saw this video, like I put out my conspiracy theory.
I saw that.
Yeah, where I was like the Charlie conspiracy guy. I think the play for NVIDIA is it doesn't make sense right now to make gaming cards because they're out of capacity at TSMC. Yeah. And the ability to design their gaming architecture at Intel gives them the capacity to make tons more money in gaming while TSMC makes the AI cards. And there you go. You'll also use those tiles with Intel. That would be the benefit. And I would also add, too, I don't know what Intel would be able to do, whatever. But what I will say is I feel like I've seen this before. Ivy Bridge was amazing. Haswell was great. Broadwell was great. Skylake hit a wall. and then they like, just because Panther Lake's way better than Lunar Lake, Alchemist was like worse than Alchemist was a 6 nanometer GPU, right? That was like
bigger than a 3070.
Yeah, it was
3070.
It was like 2/3 half the performance of a 3070. Sometimes worse in my testing, actually.
And it had a bigger die.
Yep, bigger die than 3070, half the performance, worse node.
Yeah.
I mean,
better node, right?
Yeah, NVIDIA had a worse node.
Yeah.
And so when you look at it that way, you're like, well, yeah, of course Panther Lake's a lot better. They were starting from -10, let alone 0. And so it's like, are we sure? It's like when people get disappointed with Apple, although I shouldn't compare them to Apple, like not getting as many performance increases. It's like, well, the first generation of Apple was great because they started from nothing. With Intel, it's double that. They started from behind. Yeah. Of course, Panther Lake is good. Are we sure they'll be able to do that again and again and again? Because they tried to before and they hit a scaling wall. And if they're not going to make dedicated cards, which they're not, at least with the next generation, that means they're not going to work on what you would need to get to scale higher. And so I don't know, like Intel can continue to make their little tiles for like budget, but I think assuming they can keep going in the way NVIDIA can is actually, I'd go as far as to say it doesn't make sense. Like, why would we think Intel can keep up with NVIDIA if they can't even keep up with AMD? Panther Lake, one good generation doesn't prove they can keep up with NVIDIA.
Let's wait for Nova Lake to confirm that. But I think it's a good point. And something I just thought about is like, first of all, yes, your point with NVIDIA using Intel Foundry is really good. And then one of the reasons iGPUs didn't have the performance of desktop cards, besides the power, right, is memory bandwidth. And we see with Strix Halo with a lot of memory bandwidth. And if you go to 2029 and you have like a tile-based architecture that uses like next generation versions of Foveros, where everything is really interconnect really fast, and you have super fast low power DDR6 low power DDR6X. Oh my god, you can cut that out, but in German the 6 in German is actually you say sex, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's German. But if you have super fast memory, right, and a really advanced chiplet design, this product could actually offer like really, really strong performance. We're talking about 2029, right?
Mm-hmm.
So and with that, NVIDIA could like offer something, especially if for the couple of years before that, hardware became basically unobtainium for so many, right? GPU is super expensive, memory super expensive. And if they design like a chip with Intel on Intel's node at a point where like the memory kind of slowed down again and came down in price again, and they offer something like a really strong Intel CPU with a really strong NVIDIA chiplet that supports all the latest DLSS and path tracing and whatever, and performs really well for the TDP that it runs at, that could actually be a really good product if you think about it. And maybe something, depending on how high you scale it, maybe something for like a mobile, like a handheld, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and I think I'm just now realizing when people talk about, should they use NVIDIA? Should they not? Yeah. People are getting caught in this logic trap of like, could Intel be as good? And they're not thinking about like, yeah, but even if it's debatable, why have the debate? Why? Let's have DLSS 5 in Titan Lake. Like I'm sure Intel can make some low power stuff that's decent, but why risk Druid not being a good architecture if NVIDIA is a sure thing that it will work well, it will get DLSS that Intel wouldn't have. And then Intel, they don't need to support any of that software. NVIDIA has to do, they have to do a little, actually. But NVIDIA is going to be doing all the DLSS support and if you're Intel, you're sitting here thinking, why would we do any of this if NVIDIA can do it for us and then we can save money and do something else, especially if it gives us I believe NVIDIA is now TSMC's top partner because of the AI contracts. If we can get the top TSMC partner to also be our top partner and just print money at our foundries, it's very different from AMD where they like fundamentally build both. I just, why like get out of your own way and like let your Titan Lake and Hammer Lake chips say, with DLSS support. That's a huge selling point. You're really just doing the most, going the easiest, the path of least resistance is what you're taking by doing that. And if you pull out of that, I mean, I can tell you at retail, people say that when it says ARC on a laptop, it's less likely to sell. Now, if every Intel laptop says NVIDIA, I mean, that's just free marketing.
It needs like 2 or 3 generations of a good product. Like Panther Lake is the first step. If Nova Lake is good too and the successor, then at some point ARC will be like, wow, okay. But I think they should maybe switch to like.
But did you notice in their marketing materials they don't show ARC anymore?
Yeah.
They're moving away because they know that brand's bad. I think they're just going to say XE.
Yeah. And start with a fresh brand with a good product that people have like positive memories.
Mm-hmm. All right. Final question. Jihad Rouhani writes in and says, I love high yield videos dissecting die shots. When are we getting the next video?
Very soon. I'm working on a couple of videos. The next video will probably be a video not about a chip, but about AI inference and AI hardware and how inference actually works and how large language models work, but looking at the hardware, like the flow of the data. I've actually got die shots coming in right now for. My plan is to do the entire Apple M series, M1, M2, M3, M4, M5. I'm working with Fritz and Fritz. We have some M1 is already done, and it looks really, really good. And I think maybe there's a good chance because, like, we had Intel do die shots for Lunar Lake and Arrow Lake, and I think there's a really good chance it will work with Panther Lake. So that's planned too. Fingers crossed that Intel.
So very soon, and remember everybody, you can find them at the YouTube channel High Yield. There will be a link in the description so that you can check out Max. Max, I want to thank you again for coming on. I look forward to our discussions every time. I look forward to whenever our next one will be. And yeah, I mean, everybody, please subscribe to Moore's Law Z on YouTube, ring the bell button, comment down below. We cover quite a wide range of topics. I imagine there's quite a bit of opinions out there about different things we said. And this was kind of a more fun episode where we were just throwing out opinions, not trying to like prove something, So I'm really curious what you guys thought about some of our theories down below as well. And then, of course, subscribe to Broken Silicon, your podcast app of choice. And otherwise, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And Max, I'll let you say any final words you want here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's always fun. I feel like after like talking with you for 10 minutes, I feel like I'm just having fun and I just talk about what I like to talk about. And I really enjoy it. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you again one more time. All right, everybody. I don't ever really know how to end these without rambling, so I'll just bye. I don't know. Bye. This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, it's not just me. Moore's Law is Dead is a team, with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, renders being done by the industrial designer Jean-Philippe Clermont, and special assistance is also provided by Carbon Cry and Kerry No Sugata as well. Find all of our information at www.mooreslawsdead.com on the About/Support page. In the event you do want to hire me for consulting work, hire Gerard for audio work, hire Jean-Philippe for industrial design work, or you're interested in working with Carbon Cry or Kerry No Sugata as well. You can also find our long-term sponsors on that page if you want to show them some love for putting food on our tables. Or you can also mail us some love. You can send letters or hardware donations to the following address: Moore's Law is Dead, P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. Although, to be honest, the best way to show Moore's Law is Dead some love is to support us on Patreon. Patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content truly possible. Every month, and really every day, depending on who you're talking about, me, Gerard, Dan, and Jean-Philippe are working tirelessly to provide a steady stream of content that we could not keep doing unless we knew the work was possible without being reliant on sponsors dictating every little thing we put out. Don't get us wrong. We love our sponsors, but we love directly working for you, our fans, much more. If you have any extra money, even a couple free dollars a month, consider supporting us directly on Patreon. Those couple of monthly dollars will get you access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to ask guest questions, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who I am sure would love to meet you. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to early, ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the ability to ask questions in all Broken Silicon episodes and Loose Ends live streams ahead of the recording, and the entire back catalog of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, in addition to having thanks in the credits of videos and podcasts depending on the tier, with other perks available as well. And hey, if you cannot afford to support us directly every month, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family, and on social media and websites like Reddit, and give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast app of choice. All of this does really help us so much. But like I said, this podcast would not be possible without the patrons directly providing predictable and reliable support every month. And so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher supported levels: Brad Medlin, Z-Jits, Daniel D, Nicholas Buckner, Deke, Toka, Aaron Close, Jen Rauner, MJB1, Daniel Hyde, GZ Ziggy, SNES Chalmers, Jim Ferriera, Velko Malev, Jensen Wang, Sarcastro, Compressed AI Blocks, Chris Rich, Evan Dingle, Hal Booma, Shredbird, Sammy Malas, Chris Thenos, The Boss Haas, Tommy, Jonathan, Jake Dude 23, Jake Martin, Zlicky, Gamers Unite, Ian Clifford, Meat and Pork, Travis Gooding, Win Wang, Amiable Chief, Zoot Suit Taylor, Mads, I Should, Patty Cakes, Greg, Michael McGee, Stephen Coates, Mark Mitchell, James Anderson, Mark Raidmaker, Salty, Internet Pirate, Henry Zhang, Wesley Sager, Cameron, Michelle Pell, Hexapuma, Matthew Cassels, Teak Autumn, Reginald Ari, Little Germany, Windstar, James Irader, Shay Milton, Brett Jones, Chuck Glidden, Stephen Dick, Mac Daffy, Justin Bussell, Austin Haggerty, Joe Foot, Brian Scanlon, Dan M. 1988, Hardland, Brian Wright, Slushbod, Jansen Angima, The Forbidden Juice, RB Racer, John Swin, Bing Bong 3, Solarized 80, Elbergun, Keekum, Sprutnik, Brian P. Cornser 671, Penta Winta, Omega Doge, Huger, Ander Kiwi, Smash Axley, John Wick Boomstick, Mr. Tiger, Penguins Love AI, Porcelain Oats, Nick Mania, Karim Al Masri, AI Soldier 789, Rahil Chi Bulls, Magnulus Ragkusis, Kevin Kuntz, Bespoke, Jonathan Harris, Kalin Reichel, Fred Berger, Kalin Klanush Kangani, Johnny Trans, Zabir Ahmed, Josh Arkeo RK0, Dominique Passari, and Zephyrin. And of course, thank you to Sahara for the music.